center. Scott way back, and that is gone. Sweet 16 for QB1. Lined and caught by a leaping India. Oh, it's been his night in many ways. He broke out in a big way with the bat, and he robs a line drive to end it. The Cincinnati Reds have swept St. Louis in Cincinnati for the first time since 2017.
Those calls pretty obviously courtesy of the Cincinnati Reds radio network because, frankly, the Cardinals did nothing in that three-game series against the Cincinnati Reds. Alongside Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. No BK today as we get you through a Thursday. And I got to be honest with everybody, I don't know how much positivity is going to be on this show today, T-Bone, because after a series like that where you get spanked, and I mean spanked, by a team that prior to this three-game series acted as if they were dead to rights in the postseason hopes. And then following a three-game series, Jonathan India is talking about how it's playoff or bust now for the Cincinnati Reds. They believe that they could get into the postseason after scoring 19 runs on the Cardinals. And T-Bone, it is very evident that is the most disappointing, ugliest, however you want to frame it, series of the season for the Cardinals. You get swept in 3 games. You homer once while Cincinnati homers 10 times in the Great American Small Park. They have 6 more extra base hits than you. They basically double you in extra base hits. They have a .333 batting average with runners in scoring position. Meanwhile, you go 4 for 20, and their pitching found a way to shut your offense down. Meanwhile, your pitching, where 3 of your top guys were going against them, found ways to beat them up. I'm not sure there's any way to pull out positivity from that 3-game series, and now you're 1 game below 500 with an insurmountable task coming up of trying to get back into the postseason.
Yeah, that was a embarrassing series for the St. Louis Cardinals because you're right. I mean, they went into Cincinnati going against a team that, let's just be honest, on paper is worse than the St. Louis Cardinals. Like, the Cardinals should be performing better than what they have played. And I know that's not going to really sit well with the text line because I can already tell they're a little angry today. But
what?
I know, it's shocking.
Although they do have a plus. They do have a plus 55 run differential, T-Bone. Meanwhile, you're minus 63.
Sure, but I look at that Reds team and I go, they're fine. On paper, they just look like an average baseball team. And in fact, they play below average. That's why they are also below 500. So going into that Cincinnati series, well, you've been scuffling since the All-Star break. The whole idea was, okay, this should be the series where you kind of right the ship. It's the Great American Small Park, so, like, even your offense should be able to hit. And the Cardinals didn't show up. They didn't show up for 3 freaking games, for crying out loud. And that's what's sad about it, is I understand, some people will say, well, they don't look like they're trying out. No, they're trying. The problem is offensively it is so bad right now that they can't even score at one of the easiest parks to score at in all of Major League Baseball at Cincinnati. That was embarrassing. That's worse than dropping 2 or 3 to the White Sox. And I understand how that sounds because I just said the White Sox, who are really bad. They just laid an egg. That's the series where you're supposed to right the ship, build a little bit of momentum as you get ready to start this next month, which is just a gauntlet where I think it's 6 series in a row, 22 straight games against teams that are above 500. And not just teams that are above 500, some legitimately good teams with the LA Dodgers coming to town tomorrow night to start that. And you built no momentum. You just completely laid a dud. You mentioned you had your 3 best starters. It goes all the way back since the All-Star break, man. They cannot seem to find any consistency. That's why they dropped 3 of 4 in Chicago like 2 weekends ago. And then this week they dropped all 3 in Cincinnati.
T-Bone mentioned the White Sox being bad. I guess now is a great time to remind you that the Cardinals lost 2 of 3 to the White Sox earlier this season, so that just kind of shows you where you're at. There were a couple of moments in that game last night, T-Bone, and I know that it was referenced after the game. Kyle Gibson spoke about it. It was in Derek Gould's piece up on the Post-Dispatch. This was his quote, "It's human nature to constantly feel frustrated when it's like you're fighting from behind. It's human nature when you're struggling to not play as confident and maybe have your mind wander. It happens to me on the mound from time to time, but you have to find a way to get through it." That was very prevalent in that game last night. The moment that Jonathan India hit the home run, I believe it was Jonathan India hit the home run, the moment that home run was struck to put Cincinnati up, you could see everybody's body language just say, well, we lost this series. And I don't think that's a good mindset to have, because go back a month ago, 2 months ago, when the Cardinals would be down by a couple of runs, you still felt like they were in it. You still felt like there was a chance for the team to come from behind, tie things up because their pitching was so good. And the reason why it feels as if we need a funeral and a eulogy for this Cardinals team, we're not there yet because BK's not here, and the whole team needs a eulogy together.
And I want to watch him light the conductor hat on fire.
That's true. That's very true. But the reason that I don't have the same feel about this team now than what I did when I did put that conductor hat on is because this team has lost all of its confidence. And I understand why. You're not slugging. You're not hitting for power. Your pitching has completely fallen apart. Your starting pitching is not to the level of excellence it was pre-All-Star break. And your bullpen has fallen apart. And you're making blunders in the field. So when you hear a guy like Kyle Gibson say it's tough to play from behind and it's tough to play when you lack that confidence, I hate to break it to you, Bub, but confidence isn't coming back when you take on the Dodgers, the Brewers, the Twins, the Padres, and the Yankees. You're going to have to find a way to work some devil magic into your body if you want to fight your way back into this one, because otherwise this might be a losing streak that sets the Cardinals at a position that they have a below 500 record at the end of the season.
Yeah, they're going to have to find a way in terms of just offensively. You know, their body language is bad, and I get that because they are getting just clobbered early on in these games. They're just going to have to find a way to hit. Like, that's what it comes down to for me. Offensively, that was putrid in Cincinnati. That is one of the easiest ballparks to hit at, and you would have thought that the Cardinals were playing at, like, San Francisco, for example. And they're just hitting for singles. There's a lack of power that's being shown. The slugging percentage on this team has been abysmal all season long, and it's why they find themselves below 500. I saw this from Jeff Jones today on Twitter. There has not been a team below 500 as late as August 15 that has made the postseason since outside of 2020. You know, you can throw that one to the side. Guess where the Cardinals are on August 15th? They're below 500. If they're going to get that turned around, they've got to find a way for this offense to come through. Look, we're going to talk about the pitching here coming up. The pitching's going to have to be a little bit better. Offensively, though, you cannot go to Cincinnati and just get completely destroyed by the Cincinnati Reds. And look, I get it. You're going to have some mishaps that happen where you will drop 2 or 3 to teams. You can't get swept in Cincinnati. Not when it feels like where it is, okay, our season's on the brink of disaster. This is the one series where we have to actually show up. And Ferrario, I'm not the most optimistic person I know about the St. Louis Cardinals.
You could have told me different yesterday when we opened the show.
Again, that wasn't about the Cardinals. It was about the standings.
Does it still feel like 2021, T-Bone?
Yeah, I mean, they probably could have gotten swept by the Reds in Cincinnati in 2021.
I think they probably did.
I heard today on the morning show, they have a chance to catch up with Greg Amsinger of MLB Network.
Yep. The ultimate optimist.
The ultimate optimist. And Greg Amsinger's even broken. Listen to this poor man.
You know I'm going to be on with you guys the next day. I really root for a good Cardinal game. To watch what may have been the most listless performance. They only got out-homered by 5. So I just think this team right now, to me, I thought it was the most important series. You couldn't go in there and get handled like that. And the fact that they did, I think with less than 50 games to go in the year, it doesn't look like the Cardinals are going to sniff the postseason. And I know there are people driving around going, oh, wow, that's breaking news. I really believed in this. I thought it could work. But that was a terrible performance against the Cincinnati Reds.
T-Bone, I know Greg Amsinger is the opening drives guy. I know he's Randy's guy. But maybe we should invite him on for our eulogy next week because that man sounds like he is broken. And this is what the Cardinals have done. And you know what? It just takes a strong-willed person to understand that this is what they do to you. And you can't let them hurt you anymore, T-Bone, because even when this Cardinals team was showing signs of life, I said it back in May, they were playing postseason baseball. They were playing for their lives in May for how the first month got off. And the problem is when you're playing for your playoff lives in May, it is hard to sustain that up until October, and I think you are starting to see that right now. Ollie even said it yesterday. A lot of these guys are worn down. I don't know how because you had that All-Star break. You've had some days off. It's not like you're going through a gauntlet of a schedule. You're about to do this right now. And if these guys are worn down now, I hate to break it to you, but you're not going to find this fountain of youth or this revival in the second half when you take on the Dodgers, the Brewers, the Twins, the Padres, and the Yankees.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I do worry that they kind of spent too much energy in that first half to try and get back into this race. And look, they did that to themselves. As much as they were trying to tell everybody about the first part of their season where it is, oh, you look at our schedule, it is so daunting in the first month of the year. Man, you had the White Sox on your schedule during that same time frame, and you dropped 2 of 3. You also had the Angels in that stretch. Now, they ended up winning that series. Thankfully, L.A. handed that to you. They put themselves in that hole early on to where they did have to expend that energy in that kind of mid-season surge from Mother's Day up until basically right around the All-Star break, a little bit before it with that Kansas City Royals doubleheader that they had right before that. But I think you're right. I think you're seeing that this team probably spent too much of its energy too early on in the season, and that is something that you have to be playing baseball. You have to be playing great baseball at the right time. And that's what you see with the teams that go on, whether it be a late season surge to get into October or the team that ends up going on a deep run in October. And as we're seeing from the St. Louis Cardinals, I don't know how they personally turn this around because I don't think they've got the offense. I don't think they've got the pitching. And that's not a good formula when you're getting ready to go up against some of the best teams across Major League Baseball.
Well, you ask, how do they turn this around? It's the offense. You built this team for offense. Now, I know pitching is what has carried them for the longest time, but look at it. And Katie Woo even told you this on the show last week. You built this team for offense to carry you. Your pitching is just supposed to get you there. Well, guess what? Your pitching has kept you close to 500 or above 500 all the way up until August. And you know what your offense has done? Absolutely nothing. You got outslugged by the Cincinnati Reds yesterday. I mentioned the home runs, 10-1. Reds had 12 extra base hits in those 3 games. 4 extra base hits per game. The Cardinals had 6. You don't have the offense right now to keep your head above water, and your pitching, if there is fatigue on the pitching side, well, that is going to put you down an even darker hole as you go through this next stretch. And look, if you don't have the slugging to take on the Dodgers pitching, the Brewers pitching, the Twins pitching, the Padres pitching, I don't know what you're supposed to grasp on to hope with.
Real quick, do you guys know how many teams have fewer runs scored in the National League than the Cardinals this year?
That feels like a BK question, even without BK
It's
here.
so a BK.
I'm going to go
I think
0.
I've looked at this.
Yeah, I think it's 0.
Because they're not at 500. You said the National League, Grant?
National League.
Well, okay, so the Marlins have had to have scored less runs than them. The Pirates have survived off of pitching. I'll say 2.
The Pirates and the Cardinals are tied at 496. The only team worse is the Marlins. The difference is the Pirates have done a lot better in terms of
run prevention.
So
yeah, well, sense. And the longest time the Cardinals did that. But look at what post-All-Star break has been for this pitching and run prevention. It has not been good. Hence your minus 63 run differential, T-Bone. If you were just doing the standings based off of that, the Cardinals would be the 3rd worst team in the National League.
Yeah. And I mean, that checks out because typically, like, run differential, I don't necessarily look at it when it's, like, early in the year. We're getting to that point where it actually, I don't want to say matters, but it tells the story of a team, right? It tells you, okay, how bad were they really? When you have a team
just
that's like a
-5,
exactly. When you have a team that's like a -5 at this point in the year, you go, okay, they're kind of like a 500 team. The Cardinals run differential would tell you, hey, they don't really have either they don't have an offense or their pitching's abysmal. And the answer is they don't have an offense, and when they lose in a big way, as we've seen. You mentioned their slugging, and that's the thing for me watching this Red series. And again, they've got some decent pitching on that side. Like Hunter Green's a legit stud, even while he's throwing up in his glove. They've got solid pitching. You're going to see legit pitching, though, coming up. The Dodgers have got some studs in their rotation and in their bullpen. You look at the Seattle Mariners, their whole rotation is awesome. If you're not hitting for power against the Cincinnati Reds, why should I believe you're going to do it against the even better pitching staffs that you're about to see during this kind of 4-week stretch? Because you saw it in the Reds game throughout this 3-game set. The Cardinals need 3 hits to score a run. The Reds can get 3 hits and score 3. Why? Because they're slugging. You saw in last night's game. They've got 2 runners on. What's Jonathan in India do? He hits a 3-run homer. For the Cardinals, what did they need? They needed 3 hits to score a run. That's just not a sustainable model. It's why I always talk about slug, baby, slug. I don't just say it because I dig the long ball. I say it because it's what wins you baseball games in 2024.
Italian Stallion up on our YouTube chat, The Graveyard, which that might be me with just troll account. I'm not really sure, but he says, we're talking about the obvious with this team. What do you think's being discussed in Cardinals management? We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the show. Our YouTube chat, The Graveyard, is live and running up on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. Studio Cams brought to you by the Air Alliance team. Our Air Comfort Service text line is 314-399-9646. You could jump in on that throughout the program today. We've got Tanner Hendricks and we've got Grant Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, are the Cardinals getting what they paid for with this rotation that they brought in the offseason? We'll discuss that. And there's another guy that could be claimed off of waivers that T-Bone's interested in. We'll get to that next here on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
The second, I don't know if you guys thought the same as me, the second Kyle Gibson's body language changed in the second inning when he wasn't getting calls in the corner, he was almost as if he's like, I'm defeated. I can't win if I don't get these calls in the corner. My stuff's not good enough. And when you have a rotation that's trying to survive that way, and you get closer and closer to the sprint, which is the postseason, when every pitch matters, it can change the outcome of a game. That literally is what will decide the outcome of the Cardinals. So it's the Red Sox getting tired. Their breaking balls are hanging over the middle of the plate, and the Cardinals starters who are now getting tired like everyone else, They need a home plate umpire to be on their side. If it's not, it's over.
Amzinger noticed it just like I noticed it, and he, of course, MLB Network's Greg Amzinger on the opening drive is talking about Kyle Gibson last night. That home run that was given up to Jonathan India, and then there was a couple of missed calls by the umpire. You could see the defeat on Kyle Gibson's face. And along with Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. And T-Bone, to me, that defeat on his face is very similar to a goaltender's defeat on his face. When a puck gets past him, it's not so much that he's upset with himself, it's that he realizes where this team is at. And if you're Kyle Gibson, you give up a 3-run home run for a team that is lacking power, lacking slug, lacking the ability to score runs, you play defeated because you're not sure if your team can pull you back into that fight. Hence that game getting out of hand last night for Kyle Gibson. And it feels as if that is what's happened to this Cardinals pitching staff really since the All-Star break. So T-Bone pulled these numbers earlier. The rotation since the All-Star break going into last night's game against the Cincinnati Reds, they have the 22nd ranked ERA, which is a 4.74. They have the 23rd ranked strikeout percentage at 19.4. And the relief pitching hasn't been any better, slightly better, but still bottom of the middle of the pack. 17th ranked ERA and 29th ranked strikeout percentage. Some of this can be fatigue, but T-Bone, I just think you're getting what you paid for with this pitching staff. Like, go player by player post All-Star break in terms of their ERA. Sonny Gray, he's got a 5.8 ERA. Eric Fetty, the guy that the Cardinals acquire, he's got a 5.6 ERA. Kyle Gibson, now after last night's game, a 5.1 ERA. You've got Miles Mikolas, a 6.3 ERA. And by the way, the best pitcher on this rotation since the All-Star break, Andre Palante with a 4.2 ERA, and his FIP is a 3.27. I don't know if it was expected to be this bad when the Cardinals made all of this pitching moves in the offseason, but down the stretch, this was my concern. We talked about this a few weeks ago. If you just look at the history of guys like Kyle Gibson, maybe not so much Sonny Gray, but the history of guys like Miles Mikolas, and Eric Fetty's got zero history to back with this, but these guys wear down in the second half. And you went into this season with the hope that the pitching you're bringing in would lift you up in the first half and keep you competitive in the second half. But your problem was your offense never showed up, which made your pitching have to do more, which led you to this point where now the defeat is starting to set in.
Yeah, this rotation I thought was built for the regular season. The problem is, as you're seeing, it has too much of a bottoming out effect. Like, since you mentioned the numbers that I grabbed from pre-All-Star break, I heard Danny Mac say this on the opening drive today, so I went a little bit further back, too. Since July 1st, the Cardinals rotation has a 5.36 ERA, and they're tied for the second most home runs allowed in baseball. Like, their rotation, though in theory was supposed to be, hey, they're going to go out and eat innings, and they're going to be competitive and keep us in games. And really, I do believe it does come down to, does the offense hit for them to make the playoffs? So I'm not trying to say, like, well, they need Eric Fetty to pitch like Blake Snell over his last 7 games. It would be nice. But, it's probably not Eric Fetty's game just watching him.
Real quick, T-Bone, you know what the worst part about that number that you just said is for July 1st with that ERA? Listen to the teams that the Cardinals have played. Yeah. Pittsburgh, Washington, Kansas City, Chicago, Atlanta, Pittsburgh, Washington, Texas, Chicago, the Mets, the Rays, the Royals, the Reds. Maybe 2 of those teams I can argue they have a dominant offense. Yeah. And your ERA for a pitching staff has been abysmal against those teams.
Yeah, it's a good point because, again, that was the kind of the part of the schedule where it was, okay, you play good baseball there, you get to the point what we're talking about now that we kind of look ahead now, and it's almost like a iceberg that we see while we're on a ship and we're getting ready to sink. You look at that and you say, okay, well, that's when the rotation should have been fine. My fear, and it's what we talked about at the time when they signed Kyle Gibson and they signed Lance Lynn, and again, it's not just on these guys, because Sonny Gray, you mentioned his ERA, he's not been very good in his last, it wasn't good in his last start, was pretty good in the 2 previous ones. Eric Fetty hasn't been impressive since he's been acquired from the White Sox. But the whole fear that we had dating back to the offseason was, okay, sure, it's one thing if these guys eat innings. It's another thing if these guys don't eat innings, and they're also not giving you a chance early on in games. Like that game yesterday, you give up the 3-run homer. With the Cardinals offense currently, the way it is, game was over. And you mentioned that in the first segment.
And Gibson knew that.
Yeah, exactly. And again, like, I'm not trying to just say, well, it's Kyle Gibson's fault. The whole rotation's pitching like this, if we're being honest. The rotation has to get a little bit better. And I go back to this what Katie Wu told us not this week, but last week when I asked her, is this rotation good enough for the postseason? And this is what Katie Wu had to say.
The pitching was not meant to anchor the club to the postseason. The pitching was meant to just keep them afloat, right? Notch a quality start, eat some innings, be durable. We've heard this over and over again. Well, they've done that. They've done that for the most part. They've done their jobs. The bullpen's been great. They've been excellent. All year long, we've said they're the best part of the team. The difference of this team going to the postseason and not going to the postseason is the bats. Can they hit? Can they hit consistently? Can they hit with runners in scoring position? The rotation, like we said, has done exactly what they were signed to do.
The idea of the rotation is supposed to keep the team afloat. In theory, works if you believe you had a great offense, which the Cardinals did. So, to their credit, I kind of understand what they were going for. But the problem is when you build a rotation that is supposed to, quote unquote, keep you afloat. The problem is if the offense goes through a cold stretch, or in the Cardinals' case, the offense isn't very good, what happens? You don't really have a chance in a lot of the baseball games you're playing in. It's right. A race to 4. Well, the problem is the Cardinals pitching staff is making the race a little too easy for the opponent, and you don't have the offense to climb back into these games. So now you're really starting to see where that floor kind of starts to bottom out on this rotation. Look, I think guys like Kyle Gibson, I think a Sonny Gray, I think an Eric Fetty, they're ultimately going to end up kind of turning this around a little bit. But when I say turn it around as a whole pitching staff unit, I'm not saying they're going to have one of the best ERAs in baseball. You look back since July 1st, Seattle has Tampa Bay, for example, a 3.86 ERA. Can the Cardinals get to that with their rotation? Maybe, but you can call me skeptical of that.
Yeah. Well, and just to Katie's point, the pitching was built to keep you afloat. And if you look at where they were in the first half, pre-All-Star break, for the pitching staff as a whole, I'm not isolating starting pitching or relief pitching, I'm just saying pitching. Your ERA was 8th best in the National League. Now, I know that seems like, okay, well, that's not even a playoff team, Alex. You were right there with the 2 bottom teams in the wild card in terms of team ERA. But if you go to your offense, and to the point of Katie, your offense was supposed to carry you. Your offense, in terms of OPS, there were only 5 teams in the National League that were worse than you in the first half of the season offensively, just based off of OPS. The Cardinals had a 694 OPS. Here are the teams in the National League that were worse than the Cardinals. And I think I maybe was too forgiving giving them 5. It was the Washington Nationals, the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Miami Marlins. Those were the only 3 offenses in the National League pre-All-Star break that were worse than the Cardinals. Your offense didn't do the job in the first half to give you some wiggle room, so the second half, if fatigue sets in, there's room to work with. The problem was you stayed 500 because your offense was so bad in the first half, your pitching was so good for you that you had no opportunity to build some grace for the second half, and now what you're doing is you're relying on the one thing that failed you in the first half, and the thing that got you to this point in the first half is starting to fall apart. It is a recipe for disaster for this Cardinals team, and a lot of it is how they built this pitching staff.
Yeah, and look, maybe it's looking at these numbers, because I was curious, because you mentioned the team ERA being in top 10 prior to the All-Star break. Yeah. So I looked at it, and I was like, okay, so let me split this apart and see where they were at. The Cardinals' rotation was 21st in ERA. So, they've been the same thing all season, where it was. Was it better from last year? Yeah. Like we've said all along, well, that was a low bar to clear.
Very
the bullpen
true.
Was where it was good. 3.35 ERA was 5th in all of baseball.
Yeah, but you relied on that every single game because, once again, your offense never gave you the ability to breathe.
Yeah, you had to go to your high-leverage arms. And look, do I think that those guys have gotten overused? I actually think that's a little unfair to Oli Marmol. I think what you're seeing with the bullpen was, well, they just had a ton of guys that were going to be limited once you got to the second half. Think of Andrew Kittredge. Well, how much did he pitch last year? Well, hardly at all, because he recovered from Tommy John surgery. Ryan Fernandez, he's never been in the big league. So is he running out of gas? Well, yeah, it wouldn't shock me if he's running out of gas. Same with JoJo Romero. He looks like he's run out of gas. He lost the feel for his changeup. So, when you start to throw all of that in here, I can go, okay, do I believe in that bullpen? Sure, when they are actually ready to go, when they are not worn down, yeah, I think you could see that first half bullpen. Problem is these guys are so tired now that you're getting to the point of, okay, this is why they wanted a Sean Armstrong, was they were looking for a veteran reliever who's done it consistently for the last handful of years because he won't wear down in the second half. It comes down to, for me, as much as we've talked about the pitching as a whole, the rotation, yes, it has to be better because they have to give them a fighting chance in games. Their bullpen what is ultimately going to decide this, because you're right, first half of the year, it was elite. It was the one thing that you could look to and say, aha, that's the Cardinals' trump card. Right now, the bullpen's not that. They don't have swing and miss, and you can't look at it and say that's the one thing that can help us win a baseball game.
And I want to make sure people understand, by no means am I putting all of the blame on the pitching, because I think the reason your pitching has gotten to this point is because your offense hasn't helped them out. Yes, they're 21st ranked in the pre-All-Star break in terms of starting pitching ERA, but they've kept you competitive. And the problem has been your team has scored 1 run, 2 run, 3 runs, and not been able to score multiple runs. And to Katie's point, the way that this roster was built, Mo did go get pitching, and helped in some areas, but they relied on their offense, and it hasn't come through. And we'll talk more about that offense a little bit later on in the show today. Real quick, T-Bone, I know there's one player that's available on waivers that has fancied your interest.
Yeah, so the Colorado Rockies placed Elias Diaz on waivers yesterday. If you remember that name, it's because, Elias Diaz.
It's an outfielder, right? It's an outfielder, right? Because the Cardinals need an outfielder.
No, not an outfielder.
Okay.
But he's a catcher. And the reason that he kind of just piqued my interest, I don't know if he makes sense for the Cardinals per se, just because, they've got Pages, they've got Herrera, they've got Contreras, and he's really kind of like Pages offensively. The only reason he piques my interest is if you look at his defensive metrics, he's better than both the catchers the Cardinals currently have. He's 76th percentile in caught stealing above average. He's caught almost 30% of base stealers this season, which would be the best on the Cardinals. He's 80th percentile in framing, 85th percentile in pop time. All better than the Cardinals catchers they have on the roster right now. We've seen the running game as a major problem for the Cardinals. The only reason I throw him out there, and again, I don't think they're probably going to do it because they didn't claim Ahmed Rosario. They probably ain't claiming anybody. He could potentially help you defensively with the running game. I think seeing some of the numbers for the Cardinals, I think it's both on the catchers and the pitching staff as a whole for the running game, but he is someone that just kind of piqued my interest because I was like, okay, if you really want to get better against the running game this season, he might be worth taking at least a flyer on.
Yeah. Sorry, T-Bone. Too much money. Money in, money out. Can't bring anybody else in. There's not enough money to go around. He's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get to your questions and answers. Send us your questions. Air Comfort Service text line 314-399-9646. You can also put them in on the YouTube chat, The Graveyard, at 101 ESPN STL. But coming up next, NFL Quick Hitters here on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Reds hammered 5 home runs last night as they hammered the Cardinals 9-2 in the final game of that series, in which the Reds swept the Cardinals in Cincinnati. St. Louis drops to 60-61. They're below 500 for the first time since June. They're off today. They'll be back tomorrow as the schedule gets even more difficult. They go up against the Dodgers. It'll be Miles Michaelis projected to get the first start of that series, and first pitch from Busch Stadium will be at 7:15. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Welcome back in, BK and Ferrario, along with Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. As we get into some NFL quick hitters here on 101 ESPN, and a few articles popping up on The Athletic, T-Bone, and you know we always love these, projecting of what the upcoming season could look like, which, by the way, we'll have our Fantasy Football Friday tomorrow, which means I'm in for it, T-Bone. I'm the guru this week. This guy.
I don't know about that, but you're here. You're here for it.
I'm here. Hopefully Grant will be here as well, and Grant can complain about how much he loves kickers in the NFL. But let's get to this. One article by Nick Baumgardner on The Athletic that was put out talking about NFL second-year breakout candidates. And, of course, you know, you've got the main ones, guys like C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson, guys who had big seasons, Bijan Robinson, Puka Nacua. All of those players are pretty obvious ones, but they already had their breakout season in their rookie year, T-Bone. But on this list from Nick Baumgardner, who's one that you saw that you agree could have that breakout season in their second year?
For me, I'm going to the quarterback position because I think some of these guys, like Spears, the Tennessee Titans running back that was drafted in the 3rd round last year, he could have a decent season, but I think it's the quarterback in his system, Will Levis, for me. I think you could see him have a breakout. Now, when I say that, don't think I'm saying like, oh, Will Levis suddenly going to be like a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. No. I don't think that's the case. But can he like look kind of like Baker Mayfield did with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year? I think it's possible. You know, I think he could at least solidify himself as probably the franchise quarterback for a couple years when you look at the Tennessee Titans. I like what they did in the offseason. They surrounded him with some talent. They brought in Calvin Ridley. It's, hey, let's see what we have at least. You know, let's surround our quarterback with some pieces and actually find out if he's the guy. It wouldn't shock me if he ends up putting up decent numbers and proves to be the guy. I will say Will Levis is my breakout candidate.
Yeah, the first quarterback that I thought of wasn't Will Levis. It was also somebody who he mentioned was Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson, if I was to pick a quarterback who's going to have a breakout in his second year, is going to be the guy. And a lot of this is riding on him staying healthy, but in the short sample size that we saw last season of him, he looked like a dude who could carry his offense. I mean, BK talks about him all the time. He loves them. He's got like a Cam Newton build. It really comes down to how healthy you are, because if you are healthy, you've got the ability to run. You're big body enough to score runs just as a physical quarterback, and we saw shades of the arm throughout the season. So if there was a quarterback, Anthony Richardson would be the one that I'd pick. There's 2 other guys, and I know that he mentioned this as kind of their breakout year as a rookie, but I think Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be a bigger deal after this season with the Detroit Lions. It's going to come down to how much does their head coach want to use them. And then the other one I really like is Tank Dell. And I know they're stacked in wide receivers, but I have a feeling from what we saw with Tank Dell last year, and it sucked he got injured at the end of the season, I think that dude is going to be their number 2 wide receiver, not Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, I do like the thought process there with Gibbs, because I wonder what his workload's going to look like, but you saw it in terms of like what it looks like for him. Another one that I would throw out there kind of in the running back area, I don't know if you'd call him really a breakout, but Bijan Robinson's another guy to keep an eye on. He was kind of weirdly used in the Atlanta Falcons system last year. There's a reason Arthur Smith is no longer their head coach, but he's interesting. Tank Dell's a fun one because like, I guess I kind of considered him as a guy like that kind of broke out last year, but maybe that's just me. Limited amount of games. I mean, in 11 games, he had 709 yards. So I guess like if we're going to go 1,000 yards, to me, he would have gotten there if he was healthy. One that I saw brought up in the YouTube chat was my boy, Chase Brown. I like the thinking there. Chase Brown's a guy that I'm keeping an eye on, at least in fantasy football, because I think there's going to be some value there. Now, will he break out in the scene and like rush for 700, 800 yards? I don't know. He's going to have to beat out without Zach Moss, who was pretty impressive last year. But I was impressed with Chase Brown in the first preseason game. I like the way the YouTube chat is thinking, the graveyard, bringing up some positive vibes that I can live with.
The graveyard coming in hot. I love it. With this one, as we'll go over to Twitter, they put out the odds to have the most passing touchdowns in the NFL this season. Patrick Mahomes at plus 500, Dak Prescott plus 600, C.J. Stroud 7-1, along with Joe Burrow, Aaron Rodgers plus 1,000, and the biggest odds is Josh Allen at plus 1,500. He's tied with Jared Goff. If I'm going for money-wise, boy, I would put money on Jared Goff being up there. I mean, just the amount of weapons that he has, and with Sam Laporta's emergence, you've got Jahmyr Gibbs out of the backfield. Of course, you have Amon-Ra St. Brown. 15-1 odds for Jared Goff to throw the most passing touchdowns this season. He's one that I really like. And, of course, my guy C.J. Stroud is the other one.
I like your thought process there. With C.J. Stroud, and I also like the Jared Goff one because now he's going to have another season under his belt with all of those weapons that they've got there. The kind of sneaky guy for me, and I don't know how you feel about this one, is Kirk Cousins at plus 1,200 to lead the league in touchdown passes.
I just don't know what's going to happen. Like, are they going to use Penix Jr. at times in that system?
The reason I don't think you see Penix Jr. is because I just don't think Penix is going to be ready for the big stage yet,
sense.
you know. The reason I say that with Cousins, like I go back to 2 years ago when he had that full healthy season with the Minnesota Vikings, and he had weapons there. You know, you've got Justin Jefferson was there. I think that was the year they acquired T.J. Hawkinson midway through the season. I could be wrong, but I think that's the case. He finished 5th in touchdown passes at 29. So can he end up with more weapons? I don't know if more weapons is fair, but a decent amount of weapons in Atlanta. Drake London, if he's the real deal. If Kyle Pitts, they start to utilize him and he is what they thought when they drafted him, and then you add in Robinson in the backfield, I could see where Kirk Cousins, again, it's not who I think is going to lead it, but we're going off of best value play here at plus 1,200. I could see Kirk Cousins leading the league in touchdown passes.
Alex, out of curiosity, because I didn't hear you say it, was Jordan Love on that list?
He was just above Kirk Cousins. I think he was 10-1 odds.
Yeah.
Plus 1,000. Yeah.
Okay.
So he's right there with Aaron Rodgers.
Because I just looked this up. He was second last year in the league in passing touchdowns, and like that kind of surprised me. I didn't realize that until I just looked that up. But I mean, he's
now you're
one
sounding
too
like
that's a sleeper.
BK. Now you're sounding like BK.
I know.
With your
I'm really,
Jordan Love
I'm really
love.
taking his role today.
Yeah. Just keep the hot takes to yourself over there, Grant. All right, one more on The Athletic. They put together, executives, coaches, put together the top 25 players under the age of 25. And basically the criteria was under the age 25 or younger on day one of this upcoming season. I mean, I'm not going to go through this entire list. You could pull it up, but I will give you the top 10, and you tell me if you got any problems with this, and I think you'll know where my problem lies. Amon-Ra St. Brown was 10, Kyle Hamilton was 9, C.J. Stroud 8, Tristan Wirfs 7, Penei Sewell 6, Pat Surtain 5, CeeDee Lamb 4, Jamar Chase 3, Micah Parsons 2, Justin Jefferson 1. I feel like Brian Windhorst now. Now, where would you think my problem lies, T-Bone?
I'm going to go with C.J. Stroud at 8.
Of course my problem lies there. He's 22 years old, and he already looks as if a quarterback that's going to compete for a Super Bowl this year. Like, I don't know if he should be number one. Like, I get Justin Jefferson. I don't even know if he cracks the top 4, but I definitely think he should be number 5 over Pat Surtain.
Yeah, I'm with you. I had him, and when I was kind of looking at this list, I was like, okay, how would I rank this? I agree with the top 2. I would probably go Justin Jefferson 1, Micah Parsons 2. To me, Stroud's at 3. Like, Jamar Chase.
Would you?
I think to your point of looking at him, like, he was awesome in year 1.
I think CeeDee Lamb would be 3 for me just because that dude carried the offense by himself. They had nobody else on that roster. I would put C.J. Stroud at 4 and Jamar Chase at 5.
Yeah, I think when you get to, like, that 3 through 5 range, like, I'm not trying to argue, like, Jamar Chase isn't a top 5 guy.
Of course.
But I think when you got Chase, Lamb, and C.J. Stroud, like, 3 through 5, those guys can kind of be interchangeable for me. I also am a little surprised at how low Amon-Ra St. Brown was. I think that dude's a stud. I'd have him in my top 7, and Jordan Love. As much as, like, I don't think he's as big of the franchise guy as BK does, he deserves to be in that top 10, along with, in my opinion, Aiden Hutchinson. That dude is a beast with Detroit.
Oh, yeah.
He belongs in the top 10 for me as well.
No question. He's Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, we'll get to your answers and your questions on the other side. 314-399-9646. We're not going to get to your answers. We're only getting to your questions.
Yeah. Are we supposed to ask them questions?
Well, we can ask them questions, but do we want the answers? I don't know. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Questions and answers is coming up next. 314-399-9646 here on BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario back with you to talk about my friends over at Rhino Shield, the exterior of your home, the exterior, the surface. If it looks worn down, you need help updating it. And you could do this yourself. I'm speaking to a lot of business owners right now as well because, look, somebody who owns a business, if the exterior looks old, looks worn down, customers are less likely to go in there because it just doesn't have the same curb appeal as maybe some other businesses do. Heck, I can speak to this because I've seen it at a shopping plaza right up the street from me here in High Ridge. The exterior, the paint was chipping off at a couple of stores that I was curious about, but I just didn't want to go in because of the way that it looked. And now Rhino Shield has just given it a facelift and it looks brand new. And what they do is a coating ceramic process. 2 to 3 coats that they put on it. It sticks 8 to 10 times thicker than other types of paint, and it's backed by a 25-year transferable warranty. It's 100% waterproof. It deflects 90% of the UV rays. You are setting it and forgetting it with Rhino Shield. I like to say it's the coating of a rhino because I did this back in 2020 with my home, and it looks brand new the day that Darren and his team did the work. So check them out. You could give Darren a call today. Tell him Alec Ferrario sent you. 877-25-RHINO, 877-25RHINO.com. 404-399-9646. That is our Air Comfort Service text line. You can also send in your questions on our YouTube chat at 101 ESPN STL. Just click on that BK and Ferrario link and jump into the graveyard that is live and active today, along with Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. Let's get to this one from the 314. Guys, what is something I can look forward to with the Cardinals? They have maybe one or two cornerstone prospects to build around, no pitching. I see nothing that makes me want to remain a fan for the next 5+ years.
Wow.
They look to be 500 or under in that time. I promise I did not text that in.
All right.
I mean, so like if I were to say, like, what am I optimistic about with this team? You do have some young pieces that have potential to be exciting. Like, I know people are down on Jordan Walker. We'll get to that in the 12 o'clock hour. Like, there's some frustration on how it's being used, but I still have the hope that he gets to the point you're hoping for. Mason Wynn, despite his struggles as of late, still looks like a stud that you can build around. I don't know if people have been keeping watch on this J.J. Weatherholt that they drafted at 7th overall. Dude looks legit. So
I can already tell we're so going to overhype him, and I'm ready for it.
Absolutely. And I'm not going to say one thing about that. I'm just saying he looks good in A-ball right now. But, like, you've got some young position players. Pitching-wise, I know this stinks right now, but Tink Hence, Quinn Matthews, they've been, once again, named top 100 prospects. So, like, you do have some pieces. I don't really know what else would get you excited, though, because otherwise it just seems like it's the same cycle of this Cardinals team.
Yeah, I think the young bats are still something to kind of be excited about and look forward to. You know, I wonder how much of this year is, you know, the learning curve. You get this with some young bats. And, like, if you look at offense across the league, offense is way down. Like, I've seen guys that have the same OPS plus on their OPS is down like 40 points. And that's not because they're doing anything different. The numbers are the same. What it is just baseball as a whole, offense, everything is down. I think the bats are worth kind of having some optimism around. Like, will this offense end up turning it around totally this year? I'm skeptical of that, but, like, I still am very high on Jordan Walker. I'm still pretty high on nobody's gonna like this, Nolan Gorman. I still think there's some potential in that bat. And in terms of the pitching, like, look, I understand it's frustrating now, but in like 5 years, I have no idea what it'll look like. You know, you look 5 years, if you look back to like 2019, most of the top pitchers in baseball from then are either not effective or hurt or are retired at this point. So pitching changes a lot. I got some optimism with some of the young arms in their system. You mentioned a couple of them. You know, what we saw from McGreevy, he looked pretty impressive in his outing with the Cardinals. From Graceffel, what we've seen in his short kind of sample the big leagues, he looked impressive. I'm not trying to tell you like they've got a 100-win team here in like 2 years to be optimistic about, but I do think there are some pieces that are at least intriguing and worth keeping an eye on.
Someone from the 636 texted in and said, guys, did you see what Blues Twitter just dropped? Are they making a hint at a Jake Neighbors contract extension? I don't know if anybody's pulled it up. It's just a gif of Jake Neighbors looking in the mirror doing his hair.
Great hair, though.
I don't think that that's a sign of a extension coming for Jake Neighbors. Like, go back to what Doug Armstrong had said when he was asked. I think it was Matt DeFranks that asked him about getting him a contract extension, and Armstrong was like, no, we're not going to worry about that right now with a one-year contract. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, but, like, the Blues, because they've put an offer sheet out to the Edmonton Oilers, they've done their due diligence enough to know that if another team can come in and offer sheet one of their players, that they can handle it. So, no, I don't think that's them dropping any hints. I just think that's the Blues trying to get you excited for the upcoming season.
It'd be great if it was a contract extension, though, but I'm kind of with you. I don't expect it because Doug Armstrong, it sounds like the Blues want to wait another year and see if it's legit from Jake Neighbors. And, hey, I don't necessarily mind that. You know, I don't want to jump the gun on a contract extension and find out, oh, man, we just gave this guy $4 or $5 million to be a 10-goal scorer every season.
Speaking of those offer sheets, here's this one from the 636. Guys, if Armstrong strikes out on the Edmonton Oilers offer sheets, does he go to anyone else this offseason? So this was a question that BK brought up to us yesterday that we didn't get to. There are guys out there still, Seth Jarvis, Lucas Raymond, Thomas Harley. Like, there are legit players that you could offer sheet. Here's the problem, though. All of those teams that you would send offer sheets to have $7+ million in cap space. They are prepared to give the contracts to the player if another team goes in with an offer sheet. So I don't think Doug Armstrong would strike on any of those players. Now, what I will say is if they don't get anybody this year, watch out for him to do it again next season. because there are like 3 or 4 stud defensemen that could become available as RFAs. You've got my dude Nicholas Hague from the Vegas Golden Knights. You got Bo Byram, the former Colorado Avalanche. Keandre Miller with the Rangers. Noah Dobson. Grant knows all about him from the New York Islanders. I would say that if they strike out this year, Doug Armstrong could just say, cool, we'll do this again next year when another team's in cap hell.
Yeah, I don't think they'll do it to anybody else this year. I agree with that because you're right. We went through it in the office today prior to the show, and you look at all these teams, they've got cap space, so it's not like the Edmonton Oilers, who it feels like you've kind of boxed out, essentially, from matching these offers. We'll see. But next year's one where it'll be fun. And who's the Oilers RFA again next year? I'm forgetting his name.
Evan Bouchard. That's the other one that's on this list,
That's the other
too.
defenseman that's an RFA. Man, wouldn't it be something if the Oilers like, we're going to match Broberg, and Army's like,
yep.
All right, I'll talk to you next offseason when we go ahead and offer him an offer sheet as well.
I'm telling you, man, he could do the same thing next year, and we'll talk more about the offer sheet retaliation a little bit later on in the 12 o'clock hour. That's our questions and answers today. Tanner Hendrickson, Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, we talked a lot about Jordan Walker yesterday, but we heard Oli Marmol's explanation yesterday prior to the game about why they're using Jordan Walker as a platoon bat. And honestly, it got me frustrated. We'll explain next on 101 ESPN.
very easy to look at this overall offense. There's no disrespect to the guys here, but no one is forcing your hand to get them into games, right? I mean, you look at the outfield mix, and Lars Nootbaar, for example, he's hitting 1-something over the month, his last 11 games. Like, he's not forcing your hand necessarily, but if you're hemming and hawing over which way, then I guess you go handedness just in general. Personally, with me, I'd like to see Jordan Walker play. I'd like to see him out there, and because no one else is forcing the issue. If you just had to shoo him in, and I realized that he got called up because of an injury. He didn't get called up just because they want him to go and make a run at it, but I'd like to see him play more.
So that was Brad Thompson yesterday on the Fast Lane talking about Jordan Walker, how he should be playing in the lineup in BT's opinion. And his opinion is right in line with mine as well. It's starting to get frustrating that you're not seeing Jordan Walker in the lineup because it's not a left-handed pitcher. And the reason he was recalled was to be a right-handed bat for this team. But what we didn't know when he was recalled was he was a right-handed bat as a platoon. So this was Oli Marmol's explanation yesterday from John Denton talking about Jordan Walker's big league role. Quote, the big league team has a need, and it's a right-handed bat. So that's the simplest way to look at it. It's not May, it's the end of the year. You have limited amount of games left, and our biggest struggle has been against left-handed pitchers. Yes, we know it's only Clayton Kershaw in Milwaukee has all right-handed starters for the most part, so we were aware of that going into how we made this decision. But there's also left-handed relievers where Walker can take an at-bat against. We have a need versus lefties, and it has to be someone that can play an outfield position. Of course, basically he's telling you that when Matt Carpenter went down, the Cardinals needed an outfield bat. I call this a load of baloney, T-Bone. And frankly, it makes me more mad hearing this as the explanation as to why you've brought up Jordan Walker. First of all, Jordan Walker, I can only go off of his career in the major leagues because I don't know if the stats are there for the minor leagues in terms of him being used as a pinch hitter, which is essentially what Oli is saying. This guy's going to be a pinch hitter for us when a lefty comes out of the bullpen because we're not seeing left-handed starters. As a pinch hitter in Jordan Walker's career, he is yet to have a hit. And yesterday you saw him come up in a pinch hitting role with runners at first and second, and what does he do? He pops out to the first baseman. So right there, if you're going off the analytics, that tells you that probably shouldn't be a pinch hitter for you. You need this dude as a starter. The other factor into this is what we talked about yesterday, T-Bone. It's not like Jordan Walker is Albert Pujols against left-handed pitchers. Jordan Walker is better against right-handed pitchers. So all of this does not make sense. I also don't understand why you need an outfielder right now when you have the ability to play Lars Nootbaar, Tommy Pham, Brendan Donovan. You've got Victor Scott II, Michael Ziani when he does come back. Alec Burleson can play out there for you. None of this is adding up to the point of the Cardinals just saying, well, we needed a bat and Jordan Walker was the best option that we could go with. And frankly, I think that is doing him more harm than good. He can use the argument of, look, it's the end of the season. It's not May. We need wins right now. Yeah, you need wins, and you've been losing a lot with guys like Tommy Pham and Lars Nootbaar and Victor Scott II and Alec Burleson in the lineup. Maybe it's time to change some things up. Otherwise, you are going to ruin Jordan Walker more than he might already be.
Yeah, I just don't understand this explanation. And look, if they wanted to play him as a platoon, then my whole argument of, we needed a right-handed bat and that could play the outfield. So suddenly, now that because Matt Carpenter is hurt, you need a sixth outfielder? Because prior to this injury, the guys that were up here as outfielders were as follows: Nootbaar, Scott, Donovan, Burleson, and Pham. Now, yes, that is very left-handed heavy. But suddenly the Carpenter injury is the thing that really changes this. I just don't want to see him up here as a platoon bat. And that return we had a BT on the fast lane yesterday, I just don't know who you can look at right now and say, and look, maybe Walker can't do this, but who's the person that you're looking at in that outfield mix that you say, man, they're really blocking a spot for Jordan Walker? Because Burleson you like better as a DH, and I'm totally fine with that, by the way. I have no issues with saying let's have Alec Burleson be our designated hitter against righties and lefties. He's not in the lineup because he struggles against left-handed pitching. But is Nootbaar really that guy? Like, Lars Nootbaar's been terrible. So since July, his numbers, 218 batting average, 289 on base, 322 slug. He is 25% below league average since July. And in this month, He's hitting 130 and is at a 10 WRC plus, which is 90% below league average. It doesn't make sense. And maybe they just want to see if they can get Nootbaar right, because when Lars Nootbaar is right, there's peak Lars that we talk about where he hits the ball hard, he gets on base, and he's able to slug.
Over that.
But the problem is like you said to the first part of this when he says, the big league team has a need. It's no longer May. We're getting close to the end of the year. Yeah, you need to be putting your best lineup out there every day. And right now, it's fair to say there's not an argument to have Lars Nootbaar in the lineup. And even if you wanted to say, okay, well, we have to have Pham or we have to have Nootbaar in the lineup, it's kind of an argument to not have Gorman in the lineup, so I can create a opening in the outfield by pushing Brendan Donovan down to second base.
Yeah, it baffles me. And a lot of this is because you have to use two catchers because Pedro Pages is so great defensively behind the plate that he needs to be in, and that clogs up your DH. If you're going to use the argument of, look, it's May, and this is why it's not May, this is why Jordan Walker's not playing, I can use the same argument as to why Lars Nootbaar shouldn't be in the lineup for you, Nolan Gorman shouldn't be in the lineup for you, Pedro Pages needs to stop being in the lineup the same day as Wilson Contreras and start putting players that have a pedigree of something you're trying to develop. I understand, and I will give Oli some grace because this is a tough place to be. Drew Bannister's in the same spot with the Blues. You're in the middle of competing and developing, and you have to manage both of those because there's fan bases on both sides that will be angry. But when you've got a player that has the pedigree of Jordan Walker, and you look at this and say, well, we know he was tearing it up in the minors, but we just said, well, we need a right-handed bat, and we'll just bring him up. Luken Baker is sitting in the minors, by the way, against left-handed pitchers this season. He's got 13 home runs and 1,100 OPS. That is the bat you bring up and put on the bench and use him when a left-hander comes out of the bullpen, not Jordan Walker. And I want to play this Greg Amsinger cut because I do think he makes an incredible point about how the Cardinals are using this player compared to how other teams have used players in this same position.
There are certain players who are the exception to rules, and not everyone's treated equally in professional sports. It just is what it is. I look at Jordan Walker, and he is being treated like he's not a first-round pick. He's not Jackson Holliday. Look at Jackson Holliday. They couldn't wait to get him back to the big leagues and then commit to him. He's not a platoon player. He's a left-handed bat. He's better against righties than he is lefties, but he's not terrible against lefties. He's playing every day for a team that's in second place in the AL East, and they want to win the World Series this year. Why are they doing that? They want Jackson Holliday to be one of the faces of their organization. They're committed to him. Jordan Walker, I think everyone in St. Louis believed, was being treated the same way. And there was a commitment early on. I think we're wondering now, is that commitment still there? And if it's not, and he's being coined as a platoon player, man, that will alter the trajectory of his career.
Yeah, I'm really concerned with it, T-Bone. And again, we've talked about the slice of pie, the blame game, and it's so hard to play. But, I don't like the way you're going to use Jordan Walker the rest of the season. Last year, I know you weren't in a playoff race, but you brought up Mason when you played him every single day down the stretch. And look at how that benefited him at the start of this season. And I love that Greg brought up Jackson Holliday. Jackson Holliday was sent down just like Jordan Walker because he wasn't good. And when he was brought back up by a team that is not only competing for a playoff spot in August, but competing for a top spot in their division, and they play that guy every single day because they're expecting the development to come. And I just think this is a horrible thing for Jordan Walker.
Yeah, I find it interesting that he brought up the Jackson Holliday thing when I listened to that interview today on the opening drive. And it's interesting because, you look at his numbers since he got called up. So basically July 31st until this point. And he has started every one of those games since he's been recalled, which is 13 of them. And his numbers, 255 batting average, 314 on base, 596 slug. He's got a 909 OPS. I'm not saying if the Cardinals put Jordan Walker in the lineup, they're going to get this kind of production. It's unknown. But I do know one thing, that if the Cardinals were to make Jordan Walker an everyday player, and again, a guy that probably shouldn't be a platoon bat, and if he's here, he needs to be starting, maybe you don't get that, but you know what? It doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. If Jordan Walker doesn't hit, you know what happens? He falls into the same category the rest of the offense, which is they're not hitting. Then what do you do? Okay, well, then we can reassess. Does he need to go back down? Does he need to sit on the bench and work on some things while we throw some other guys out there? The Cardinals are at the point where they should be at least trying it because there is some upside in Jordan Walker's bat. We saw it last year when he got recalled from the minor leagues, where he can be a big league contributor. I think he's looked in the very very small sample size that we've gotten to see of him. He has looked pretty good at the plate so far. I don't understand the willingness to have him on the bench and platoon him when especially he is not good against left-handed pitching, not just here at the big leagues, but throughout his minor league career. It'd be one thing if he was great against lefties. Then I would say, you know what, I can kind of agree with it. Also, it'd be another thing if you had Lars Nootbaar hitting, if you had outfielders that were hitting. It's just not the case. If he is up here, he needs to be utilized as a starter. If he doesn't hit, then we can go from there. But at least let's see if he can swim before we just say, whoa. Now we need to make sure he's got his floaties on before he goes in the pool. I think Jordan Walker's going to be able to swim. I think he's going to be able to hit right-handed pitching. I think he's figured things out. Throw him in the lineup and see if you can get that spark like Jackson Holliday has provided for the Baltimore Orioles.
So for the 3-1-4 brought up, guys, Baker can't play the outfield. His team, he barely plays first base. He's not the answer for the Cardinals. I'll reiterate this. I don't care about the outfield playing time for Jordan Walker. If you're worried about getting another outfielder up here who can hit left-handed pitching, you've already got the outfielders. You're bringing up Jordan Walker because he needs to play. The reason I say Luke and Baker comes up is because the way they're using Jordan Walker is a bench bat. Oli said it to John Denton. We know there's not a lot of left-handed pitching that's coming up on our schedule, but there's a lot of left-handed relievers coming out of the bullpen. That is a Luke and Baker spot. I understand he doesn't play in certain positions. He can't play anywhere other than a DH, but is that better than having a guy who's positionless and can at least hit the left-handed pitchers? Better than putting a dude who is your top prospect on the bench for other than pinch-hitting roles for the next 7 days? I don't think so. And the other part with Jordan Walker is when I look at this season, let's just go down the hypothetical path that seems more realistic after this series against the Reds. Let's go down the path that you missed the playoffs. Guess what you're doing next year? You're relying on Jordan Walker and Nolan Gorman and Alec Burleson and Mason Wynn to carry your team to a playoff next season. And Jordan Walker had spent all but 1 month in the majors, and then the final month and a half of his time in the major leagues was spent as a platoon bat. You trust that, who had a tough time this year adjusting to pitching? You trust that as an everyday outfielder next season? I'm sorry, but I just don't.
Yeah, and that's the thing for me is like, okay, he's probably playing into this future aspect to your point of what you're talking about. So why not try? And look, I understand the Cardinals probably don't want to say, well, we don't want to just kind of gift wrap to Jordan Walker. And you know what? I think that's somewhat fair. And I somewhat understand that if you're the St. Louis Cardinals. But I also agree with Greg Amsinger. He's just on a different spectrum because not only because he's a first-round pick, but because his ceiling is so high. You know, we talk about it. He's the guy that can potentially be a superstar for the St. Louis Cardinals if everything ends up clicking together. And again, it doesn't hurt to throw him in the lineup. Why? Because nobody else is hitting. Like, it's hard to point to and say against a right-handed pitcher, A, how you can construct a good lineup, but B, who would be your starting outfielder for him. And to your point on Luke and Baker, and look, I don't believe Luke and Baker's probably a big leaguer. We saw 100 plate appearances from him last year. From what we saw, you know, I wasn't necessarily all that impressed. But, you know, maybe another year development. Maybe he found a way to kind of work towards becoming a big league pinch hit bat. Well, even if he doesn't play the outfield, if, let's say, I'm looking at their lineup from Tuesday night, the first game against a righty since Jordan Walker was up. You know, they had all their lefty bats in. They had Gorman, they had Nootbaar, they had Scott in center, they had Donovan in left, and they had Burley at DH. Well, worst case scenario, if there's a lefty that comes up towards Burleson's spot, A, I can pinch hit for Burleson, and Baker never sees the field. But let's just say you decide to go with, you know what, we're going to have Nootbaar face the lefty, and now we'll go with we'll pinch hit Baker for like Gorman. Well, you still got Pham that can come off of the bench and can go play second base. Or if you both pinch hit Pham for Nootbaar and pinch hit, let's say, Baker for Gorman, well, now you're saying, well, what do we do at second base? Well, now I can actually circle Brandon Crawford and go, hey, he actually does have a role on the team. Brandon Crawford could go out in the field rather than just sitting there in his hoodie and not doing anything. So
hey, he's the DJ.
Fair, but and like that wasn't a shot at like Brandon Crawford is like, oh, he's not doing anything for the Cardinals. No, he would actually like. There's a legitimate reason I could point to his spot on the roster and now say, look, we are actually utilizing it compared to like the 4 games he's played since the All-Star break.
It's frustrating that they're doing it this way, and the concern is rising more and more of the future of Jordan Walker with the Cardinals because of situations like this, and using the argument of, look, it's not May, we need to put the best lineup out there. Well, you're lying to yourself and the fans then because you're not putting the best lineup out there. When you look at Lars Nootbaar's struggles, I know Victor Scott has picked up some big hits for this team, but he's also been striking out a ton, and you haven't had the big bat of Tommy Pham either.
And I will say this, like, as much as I do want to see him against righties, I do think there are some matchups where it's fair to say, okay, you know what, he probably doesn't profile well against this guy. Like, if you go up against a hard-throwing slider guy that's got just this wipeout sweeper, like, let's say Sonny Gray was, instead of a Cardinal, a Red, for example. Sonny Gray was a starting pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds. He's probably not a good matchup for Jordan Walker. Why? Because he's got a great sweeper. So, like, if there are a couple right-handed matchups that you look at and you say, okay, that one probably doesn't profile well, we're still a little unsure if Walker actually has learned to kind of lay off of that pitch. Okay, now I understand where you're looking at it going, okay, let's not put him in the lineup because, once again, we're putting him in the best position to where we can use him later on in games. But I can't buy that every right-hander that they're going to see moving forward from now until who knows when Walker's either A, sent down, or B, for the rest of the season. Surely not every right-hander has a slider that they're too terrified is going to just be too much of a wipeout pitch against Jordan Walker.
He's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Alex Ferrario, Grant Francis as well. Coming up next, we're going to get into the Blues because one thing that I was thinking of yesterday, watching Doug Armstrong act as ruthless as he did, or some GMs around NHL are saying he did, how impactful is that for Alexander Steen? And I also know a lot of people are talking about retaliation offers. We'll discuss that next on 101 ESPN. Along with Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario as we talk a little Blues hockey now. We still await the decision from the Edmonton Oilers on matching the offer sheets of both Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway. And, of course, we might be waiting until Tuesday. They've got 7 days to match. What's odd about this is sometimes when the offer sheets happen, when teams are matching the offer sheet, they come out 24, 48 hours after and say, we're matching this offer sheet. It's just a matter of us working out the details. And right now it's been crickets from the Edmonton Oilers side. Might make sense considering Stan Bowman's got multiple other things to figure out.
Oh, I thought maybe he's like flying back from vacation still. He got the call from Army while he was at like Tahiti at a bar on the beach.
He's at Margaritaville with his Jimmy Buffett shirt on.
He's jamming, and he got a FaceTime from Doug, and he's like, Doug! And he's like, yeah, you may want to sit down for this.
Stan Bowman's got his shirt open, and as BK said yesterday, Doug Armstrong lifted his shirt up and told him we're giving offer sheets. But one thing Elliot Friedman said on the 32 Thoughts podcast yesterday that kind of stuck out to me was just why Doug Armstrong did this move. And, he was theorizing more than anything and basically saying, like, some of the theories are, he doesn't like Stan Bowman because of the rivalry between the Blues and the Chicago Blackhawks. He loves Ken Holland, and this was a kind of work behind closed doors once Ken Holland stepped down to get this deal done. But the first thing that I thought of was watching Doug Armstrong act as ruthless as he does with an offer sheet. And again, this is not the first time Doug has done an offer sheet. He did this prior, and he did it as a retaliation offer sheet to the Vancouver Canucks back when they offer sheeted David Backes back in the late 2000s. But anyway, you've got Alexander Steen waiting in the wings to take over as general manager. Doug Armstrong acts ruthless, aggressive, makes ways and finds ways to make his team better without waiting and sitting on his hands. How impactful is that for Alexander Steen to see Doug Armstrong work this way? Because, look, Steen's going to have his own mindset, his own ways of doing things. Doug's not going to get in the middle of this and tell Steen that this is how you need to act as a GM. But Steen knows a locker room. Steen knows a roster and knows players that work well in a room, which I think is very beneficial for GMs. But to be able to witness how Doug Armstrong just has no ability to worry about other people's feelings in the NHL, pulling off big-time trades that seem like a steal on one side, offering sheet players to put another team in cap hell. Man, I think that's huge to have in Alexander Steen's arsenal when he takes over as GM.
Yeah, I think it's very impactful for Alexander Steen to see the way that Doug Armstrong's kind of operated this offseason. And like, that's not to say, like, if Steen didn't do this, like, I would freak out if he took over as GM tomorrow. But I do think it is beneficial because, like, he has done it a lot of different ways this offseason. You think back to, let's go to the draft, for example. They didn't trade up or down in the draft. They stay at their spot, but they end up trading Kevin Hayes away, attaching the second-round pick that they ended up getting back to send out that salary. And you look at what they do in free agency. They kind of wait on day one. They're not players on day one. And then in day two, they end up being where they are taking on salary to help teams and kind of relieve some of their cap space. It's how they ended up with Fox. It's how they ended up with, I can't remember if that was Texier or not. They did it with 2 or 3 of the players they brought in this offseason. And then he continued to add just a bunch of pieces. And then he showed, like, hey, for you to be the best GM you can be at the NHL level, you have to be ruthless. I think there's one issue I have with the Cardinals is I don't think they operate as ruthless as they should. Now,
absolutely.
It's a little tough to say that when they DFA James Nail on his birthday, but that was like the last time because
but he still had a job. He was still going to the Cardinals minor league.
But I think when you look at Doug Armstrong, he's not afraid to move on, whether you agree or disagree with it, from some of the franchise players. He did it with Ryan O'Reilly when they had a bad year. He let Alex Pietrangelo walk. Now, that one didn't work. They're still kind of chasing their tail on that one. But he's not afraid to do it. He did it with Backes.
He did it with Perron. He did it with Vladdy.
Exactly. He's not afraid to do what he thinks is best interest for the St. Louis Blues, not what kind of is, what's best for what we think the fan interest is. No, he's cold-hearted. He's willing to do these moves. And again, sometimes they do not work, but I do think that is the best way to run an organization. So I think it's very benefactory for Alexander Steen to be there with Doug Armstrong, see what he's been doing. And honestly, I almost hope it was Alexander Steen that led the charge for the offer sheets, just so I could be. So he's like, hey, man, when I take over in 2 years, this is going to be a different animal with the St. Louis Blues.
Well, and what I think is so important, too, is they were talking about this on the Athletics Hockey podcast. It was Mark Lazarus and Jesse Granger, and they were talking about how hopefully this ignites a little bit more offer sheet usage by other teams when, because it's kind of like an unsung rule that like, oh, you're not supposed to do this, and Armstrong pulls it off. And the one thing that I do think Steen is going to need as a general manager is that ruthless, aggressive, don't care what other people think ability. And there is no better GM in the NHL than Doug Armstrong in that category. So I think that is a very important thing to have for Alexander Steen to be able to work with Doug Armstrong in that sense. Now, the other thing that I know a lot of people have brought up with this offer sheet, and I think it's got some Blues fans concerned, T-Bone, is what Elliot Friedman theorized on the 32 Thoughts podcast yesterday.
Now, one of the things that Oilers fans are talking about here is a revenge offer sheet against Jake Neighbors or something like that. Number one, I would bet that St. Louis has done a lot of the math on this. Yes, the cap is supposed to go up again next year by, close to $5 million, but you've got a Draisaitl extension coming, and you're going to have a McDavid extension coming and a Bouchard extension coming. I think that St. Louis would be betting that Edmonton can't do this.
T-Bone, how do I always say it? Okay, tough guy. Ooh. You cannot worry about a retaliation offer for Jake Neighbors to do a move like this. First of all, Edmonton doesn't have cap space to retaliate because Jake Neighbors is an RFA next year. And guess what? Leon Draisaitl is going to be making $4+ more million than what he's making right now next year. Evan Bouchard is going to be making $6 or $7 million more than what he's making this year. And yes, they've got some contracts that come off of the books, but none that are going to put them in a position that can give an offer sheet to Jake Neighbors. And what Friedman said there is where I fall in line with this, T-Bone. If you don't think that Doug Armstrong and his team already methodically wrote this out, that if we do this, who are our RFAs that could be offer sheeted this year, next year, the year beyond that? And it's Jake Neighbors with glaring red lights. It's the only RFA that will get some type of contract. But to pry him away from the Blues, who will have more cap space next season than what they have right now, you're talking about $6 or $7 million to put the Blues in a bind. And guess what? Edmonton can't afford to do that. So if it happens, then you hope that the Blues respond and you hope that they come out right with the correct player. But I don't see it happening by Edmonton. I think you picked the perfect team to do this with because they're in no position to retaliate with an offer sheet.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not too concerned about that. And even if you were, my response to that would be, don't do what the Edmonton Oilers did and wait till like mid-August to try and figure this out with these RFAs. If you had a sense that, let's say Edmonton did find a way to have cap space, and let's say they were thinking, we got to get back after them pesky Blues and go offer sheet Jake Neighbors. Wow. Well, don't wait until mid-August to figure it out. What the Oilers did, it wasn't necessarily all that smart of, okay, let's go out, let's get into free agency, and this is where them not having a GM for free agency was just baffling, where it is, okay, let's go spend all this money, and then we'll figure out our RFAs at the end of the year. Well, when you put yourself...
they could lowball them.
Yeah, exactly. And when you put yourself in a situation where it is, okay, we think we can lowball those guys, like that I can kind of understand. The problem is that when you set yourself up to where they are, where they're like not even right at the cap, they're over the cap, well, you're easy pickings for a team. If some team looks at that and says, well, we've got cap space, like the Blues said, it's easy for them to go out there and just say, okay, we'll offer sheet these guys, we'll give you a second and third round pick, and there's not a lot you can do. So if that was a legitimate concern, and again, I'm kind of with you, I don't think it's going to be a problem long term. I don't think it's an issue once you get to Jake Neighbors' RFA status next year. Just don't wait till mid-August to get it done. And I understand, well, what if that limits you in free agency? Well, if Jake Neighbors is so important to the team, like the Oilers are acting like these guys are, well, then they shouldn't be waiting for contracts by mid-August. Get the deal done so you don't have to put yourself in this bind.
So put this into perspective. So like let's say the Blues get both offer sheets, guys, and they'll be at the cap, like $100,000 less than the cap. Next year, the cap's expected to go up another $4 million. So that's $4 million more you have to work with. On top of that, Radek Faksa comes off the books, $3.5 million. You've got Kapanen, who's $1 million that comes off the books. You've got Suter, who's $1 million. Perunovic, who's $1 million. You're going to have $7 million to work with. And the only RFAs you have to worry about next season would be Alexei Toropchenko, Jake Neighbors, and I know a couple of people on the text line said Joel Hofer. The thing about Edmonton is they're not going to offer sheet to Joel Hofer because they've got a Stuart Skinner who they've already are paying right now. So you could be worried about it. I understand being worried about it because a lot of other teams view this as, and we've seen it in the past, when one team offer sheets a player, the other team goes after one of their guys. The most recent is Montreal and Carolina, where it was Kotkaniemi who gets offer sheeted by Montreal or by Carolina, and then Montreal offer sheets Sebastian Aho. It happens, but it's not going to happen, in my opinion, by an Oilers team that has to pay $4 million more to Draisaitl, $5 million more to Evan Bouchard, and in a couple of years, pay about $15 total million AAV to Connor McDavid to keep this team intact. He's Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up in 15 minutes, we'll get to the junk drawer, but coming up next, T-Bone found these numbers of a glaring hole offensively in certain positions in the lineup. Can they fix this for the now, or does their future fix it? We'll discuss it next here on 101 ESPN.
Greg Francis here with a SportsCenter update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. A tough one for the Cardinals last night. They were hammered 9-2 by the Reds as they clobbered 5 home runs last night. Cincinnati did as they sweep the Cardinals in that series out in Cincinnati. And the Cardinals dropped to 60-61, the first time for them below 500 since June. They look to get back to 500 tomorrow as they welcome in the LA Dodgers for a 3-game series. It'll be Miles Michaelis getting the first of that series for the Cardinals. And the first pitch tomorrow at Busch will be at 7:15. I'm Greg Francis. The SportsCenter update has been brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
Along with Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. So the Cardinals have really problems all over with their offense right now, T-Bone. But I want to let you set this one up because you looked at these numbers. You did your BK dive last night because you were so interested in this. In terms of certain areas in the batting order that have been not just bad, but abysmal for the Cardinals this season.
Yeah, so I was, credit to the Fast Lane, I was listening to them yesterday on my way home and then watching the game, and I was thinking they were talking about, like, how do you construct, like, the best lineup for the St. Louis Cardinals? And my immediate thought was, that doesn't exist. But I dove into it a little bit because I was curious because we know who's struggling, we know who's hitting well, but I was curious, like, okay, what does it look like when you look at just the position in the batting order? You know, forget the players, forget the names, let's just look at where it is in the order. And I find it interesting when you look at the leadoff spot for the St. Louis Cardinals. In the leadoff spot, they are 27th in on-base percentage at .287, which is not ideal this season. They are 24th in OPS, and they have an 83 WRC+, which is 23rd across Major League Baseball. When you look at the 2-hole, okay, they're getting production there. They're 13th in OPS at 780, and they are at a 118 WRC+, which is basically 18% above league average. That puts them 11th in baseball. And then we get to the other two spots that are really the ones that kind of stick out to me. Now, one of these I think is a little bit of a outlier, and I'll explain why here in a minute. But the 3-hole, 20th in OPS this season, 18th in WRC+ at just 6% above league average. The cleanup spot in the order has a 660 OPS, which is 27th across all of baseball, and is 15% below league average with an 85 WRC+, which is 27th. Now, the reason I say one of those to me is a little bit of an outlier is the 3-hole. And the reason I say that is because, one, you had Goldie Arenado spend some time there this season. And as we know, Goldie Arenado have not been producing. That's why you see the cleanup one so low. But also, Wilson Contreras got hurt and missed a significant amount of time when his arm got broken on that backswing by J.D. Martinez in that Mets series a couple months ago. So that's why, to me, the 3-hole spot, I go, okay, that one, though the numbers tell me it's been bad, I kind of look at that one a little bit differently because of Contreras injury. The 2 and 3 spots for me, okay, that's where you've had Alec Burleson for the most part this season and kind of Wilson Contreras. They've kind of rotated between those 2 spots. 2 and 3, you're good. But if I'm looking at your leadoff spot and your cleanup spot, and those are also our bottom 10 in baseball, it tells me there's a problem with your offense. And we've seen it this year. And look, I like Mason Wynn. Mason Wynn has not been a great leadoff hitter for the Cardinals. His on-base is below 300. So he's kind of scuffled once he's moved into that on-base spot. I'm not worried about him long-term, but I just don't think he's a leadoff hitter because his on-base percentage is carried by his batting average. And as we've seen, batting average can really fluctuate depending on just what your luck is, for example. And then I look at the cleanup spot, and they just have not had anybody produce when they put guys there. They've tried Arenado. They've tried Goldschmidt there, and it just has not worked. And to me, it's a big driving force for why you're really seeing the offense scuffle. Look, you can talk about 6 through 9 if you want in their lineup, and, should they be playing Victor Scott? Should they be playing Pedro Pajes? Those guys that's not the spot in the order that should really be carrying your offense. It's in that top 4. And when you've got 2 spots in your top 4 that are bottom 10 in baseball in terms of production, you're going to see an offense that really scuffles like we've seen from the St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah, and I hate to break it to Cardinals fans with this one. And again, not to be so negative all day today, but you're right. I'm not worried about your 2-3 spot because if Wilson Contreras is healthy this season, I think you're probably talking about him at least being close to the MVP conversation for how well he has performed. And that to me is your 3-hole hitter. And the way Alec Burleson has played, I understand he hasn't been great against lefties, but against righties, he's been so good. And it's that first full season of Alec Burleson. He's in my 2-hole next year, and I feel very confident with that. The problem is the same problem that you've had since you went out there and traded for Paul Goldschmidt and Nolan Arenado. And what's that, 2018? You don't have a cleanup hitter. Now, maybe you have a 3-hole hitter now, like we just talked about with Wilson Contreras. But, man, that's 660 OPS with a 27th ranked WRC plus for your cleanup hitter. I mean, you want to talk about why this team stinks with runners in scoring position. Look no further than guys like Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, Nolan Gorman, Lars Nootbaar, these players that they've used in that spot. So the cleanup thing, you spent so long trying to find a cleanup hitter. I mean, we went through the Marcell Ozuna phase. You went through the Jason Hayward, although I know Jason Hayward was used more like in the 2-hole. But, you've been looking for a cleanup hitter for a long time. And then it was Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt. And you're like, hey, this is it. Finally got there. And you had it in 2021, 2020. But then it disappeared because those were older guys. So, to me, you're back in the same issue that you've had in the past. The leadoff one, I think, is also very alarming. I thought Mason Wynn was going to be that guy. But, I mean, you're not wrong, T-Bone. The walks just really aren't there for Mason Wynn. He's a guy who looks to make contact. To me, I feel like that's a really good middle-of-the-order bat, maybe talking about 6th, 7th, or even if you're going the double leadoff spot with a Mason Wynn. Your leadoffs were supposed to be Brendan Donovan, who's been inconsistent. Your leadoff, at a time, it felt like was going to be Lars Nootbaar, and that has not been consistent for you. When was the last time this team had a leadoff hitter that you trusted every single game? Matt Carpenter?
It's been a while. And, I know, they did the, 2-year experiment with Tommy Edman at the leadoff spot, but he was kind of like Mason Wynn. And, again, really good player. I'm not trying to say, Mason Wynn shouldn't be in the starting lineup. No, he absolutely should be. It's just when you put him in the leadoff spot, it's harder to it's harder to look at him as a leadoff hitter. Now, he does give them a competitive at-bat, which is nice. But, again, his on-base is really carried by his batting average. And since he's been moved in 64 games as the leadoff hitter for the Cardinals, he's hitting .247, has a .293 on base, and that's a .678 OPS. He's been about 16% below league average. Well, if you want someone to be the table setter for the offense, you need someone that's getting on base in that one spot. So now you've got them on base, and now you get to that 2 spot that you're talking about with Burley and Wilson Contreras. But to your point, I'm looking at the Cardinals lineup right now, or I'm looking at the offensive performances since the All-Star break, and I'm looking at the highest on base for the team. Well, the highest on base so far since the All-Star break are guys that aren't like the regulars. The regular with the highest on base is Nolan Arenado at .330, and I'm not going to hit Nolan Arenado leadoff because he's getting on base. It just shows you that this is a flawed roster because of you're seeing the step backs from some of the younger guys. Because Brendan Donovan, a guy that you had mentioned, his on base 284 since the All-Star break. Lars Nootbaar 314 on base since the All-Star break. They don't really have guys that can fit into that leadoff spot to be the table setter, and then they really don't have the guys that can really just do damage in that 4 spot to help kind of clean up the bases. It's why you're seeing their struggle for offensive production this season.
Yeah, and the scary part about this too, T-Bone, is that if you look in their system, you don't have this coming up. You don't have this in the wings ready to take over. Just go off the leadoff spot. And there are people arguing on our Air Comfort Service text line that Mason Wynn should be a leadoff because he's been great all season. But, I mean, look, his on-base percentage isn't to the level that you'd expect. I mean, he's 27th in on-base percentage right now. That's not something you need with your on-base percentage or your leadoff guy when you're talking about a 2-hole and a 3-hole who could do some damage. You don't have a leadoff hitter in your system. I've seen a couple of people bring up Victor Scott. I mean, Victor Scott has been fine, but striking out just as much as he's picking up hits in this second stint. I think the next leadoff guy for you could be J.J. Weatherholt, but you're talking a couple of years for a guy like this. You don't have a cleanup hitter in your system that's coming up. Maybe somebody would argue with Chase Davis, but I mean,
it's got to be Walker.
It's got to be Walker. And look at how they're using Walker. Walker's a platoon bat right now. So, the system doesn't provide the optimism of, oh, yeah, your offense is going to be fine. It feels a lot like what you were doing when you were searching for Goldschmidt and Arenado of, we're going to have to go find these guys.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you had mentioned that with that cleanup spot, and you mentioned how it's kind of, okay, maybe prior to when they had Ozuna, when they were searching for that guy to be paired with Paul Goldschmidt. It's interesting because it certainly is starting to feel, and we've talked about this with the Cardinals in the past, where you're starting to see that kind of pendulum swing, where it is for the early kind of 2010s, it was, man, look at this. They are developing pitching. They've got all these guys in the pipeline, but then it was, well, where's the offensive pieces? And they had to go out and they had to trade for the Paul Goldschmidt. They had to go out and trade for the Marcell Ozuna. They had to go out and trade for the Nolan Arenado. Well, now it feels like, and then you saw the pendulum swing of, okay, well, look at all these offensive bats they've got in the system. They've got this Gorman, they've got this Jordan Walker, and then it was, well, where's all the pitching? Well, now you look back at it, guess what we're starting to see? It feels like that pendulum is starting to swing back because you look in their system for the offensive help, and it's who? You know, J.J. Weatherholt looks awesome so far. And again, I mentioned this earlier. We are so going to overhype him here at this point, probably next year, for how good he's looked. But when you look at the outside of him, there are a lot of guys that you look at. You mentioned Chase Davis. Chase Davis started to really turn it on in the A-ball, but he's kind of underwhelmed since he's been in the system. You look at AAA outside of Von Herrera. I understand Luke and Baker's played well. They clearly don't view him as a big leaguer. It's why he's not up yet. You got Herrera and Thomas Ajayci. AA, there's not a lot of bats down there in that minor league system. All it is now is pitching. Now, I don't know how high the ceiling is for those guys, but Quinn Matthews, Tink Hintz are the top 100 prospects for the Cardinals with their rotation. TK Roby on a rehab assignment right now, and he's someone that they really liked when they acquired him from the Texas Rangers. And then you got Ian Bedell, another interesting name. Like, you look at the pitching side, it's interesting again, but then you look back on the offense, and that pendulum certainly feels like it is starting to swing again to where it is, okay, maybe they have pitching developing, but are they going to have the bats that's necessary for it?
Yep, you put so much stock into guys like Gorman and Walker and those players to carry Lars Nootbaar, and now it's not panned out, and you're starting to wonder who the next wave is, and you're right, the pendulum goes the other direction. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up in 15 minutes, there was a list in terms of quarterbacks in college football, and we're going to discuss where Brady Cook fell and how impactful that's going to be for Mizzou to make the college football playoffs. But coming up next, we'll dive into the junk drawer here on 101 ESPN.
Open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
Brought to you by Fenton Bar and Grill. Best trashed wings in Missouri. Dine in, carry out, 7 days a week.
Time to dive into the junk drawer with Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. T-Bone, what do you got?
Alex, you enjoy going to amusement parks, going on rides and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, I think so. I haven't been to one in a really long time with the exception of Disney World. I don't know if you consider Disney World an amusement park, though. Like, Disney World seems like it's more than that, but, like, when I go, yeah, for the longest time in high school and college, I went to Six Flags every week because I had a season pass, like in the summertime. I went every week.
Grant, what about you? You a big amusement park guy?
I don't go very often, but I enjoy it when I do go. I make sure I don't eat before, just to preserve myself. But I do like going.
Yeah, we all remember the story, T-Bone, of me puking on a girl that I went on a date with at Six Flags.
And that was quite the story.
Don't eat before.
Yeah, that's true. So I saw a video on social media yesterday, and it doesn't say what amusement park this is at, but you want to talk about just, I don't know how to feel about this guy.
I saw this.
I call this guy a psychopath. If we're talking about the same one, so there's a guy, so there's this ride where you sit in these chairs, and it basically push a button, and it just, like, drops people. And then it, like, stops and brings them back up. I don't remember what those rides are necessarily called, but it's one of those, okay? There's a guy, the guy that operates the machine, that presses the button that drops these people. In this video, he kind of pushes on the little machine that's right in front of these people and says, hold on, guys, it looks like there's something wrong with the chain. And he walks away, and there's a delay to the button when he pushes it to drop them. So he walks away. So you've got these people freaking out like, wait, there's something wrong with the chain? And then, boom, the thing will drop. And you hear all the people screaming and freaking out about it. I could not handle this kind of guy. I would freak out when I saw that guy again when the machine came back up.
Oh, honestly, good on him. I think he's doing the right thing.
Terrible.
Now, first of all, let me preface this by I would never get on that ride because I fear heights, so, like, it would never happen.
You, but if I did get dragged to it, like, if it was, like, a punishment for our football pick-up, I don't want that guy being the one that's pressing the button like, oh, I forgot to put the shoulder straps on. The what? Boom, and drop.
T-Bone, you really shouldn't have opened up your mouth on that one because that might be one of the punishments. Because isn't BK afraid of heights, too?
I don't remember. I don't know if I've ever heard BK complain about heights.
That might be one of the punishments.
I can tell you, anyway, I would freak out doing like a roller coaster. So like, I'm just going to throw it out there because it probably should be a punishment.
Here's the thing about it. Why do you go to amusement parks? To have fun and for the thrills, right? That's why people ride those rides, the thrill. What is more thrilling than sitting on top of a big freaking ride that drops you and thinking that the ride is broken? Oh, man. Like, you want to talk about get you going. That'll do it.
I mean, I want a thrill, but I also don't want to fear for my life.
Yeah, I don't want to feel
That's the whole point.
Oh, no.
You're going on that ride.
No, when you get on the ride, the whole point is to be like, okay, I want to get my energy up. You know, I want something that is going to kind of rattle me a little bit. I don't want the fear of, like, this guy's telling me the machine's broke and then the machine drops me. That is terrifying.
Yeah. No, man, you'll walk off. You're like, damn, that got me thrilled. And then you'll love the ride even more when you go on it next time.
No, if there was ever a guy that did that to me, I don't know if I'd ever go back to an amusement park.
I think it's great.
I have trust issues already. I would have a serious trust issue with the people operating the machinery.
Which one do you guys hate more? Do you guys, like, when it comes to the heights and stuff, the swings at Six Flags where they, like, take you all the way up in the swings and you're just circling around, or the Superman?
See, I like the Superman one. It freaks me out a little bit, but I like the Superman one. I can't do anything that spins in circles. If it spins in circles, I will vomit.
I would probably rather do the swings, you know?
I'm with you.
Rather than the Superman. I mean, I would probably avoid them all. I'm so terrified of heights, it's not even funny. It's not as bad as, like, when I was younger, but if I had to choose one, I would probably do the swings. I don't have an issue with the whole, like, you know, spinning thing. That doesn't necessarily bother me, but I would probably go swings. I don't know why, but that's the one I would choose.
I was forced by my friends one time to get on the Superman because I never wanted to do that. And I'm pretty sure I just sat with my arms crossed the whole time, just pissed off. Even like as the ride was falling, I just had my arms crossed, just irritated.
I'll never forget when we were in high school. I went with my my buddy and likes to play pranks on people. And so we got on that ride. They buckled us in. They started to pull us up. And for people that don't know, like, it just slowly goes up in the air. My buddy started acting like he was having a panic attack. Like, he was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. Get me down. Get me down. They brought the whole ride down. And he was, like, joking with them. They kicked him off of the ride. They said, you got to get off. You can't go back on. Yeah, I'm like, well, and that's why you don't joke around on these types of rides unless you're the operator.
See,
and you totally have fun with it.
I respect that. I'd rather those vibes than trying to convince you that
tell me it's broken.
You're about to die. Yeah.
People are texting and saying the Superman isn't there anymore.
Wait, really?
I haven't been to Six Flags in so long.
I haven't been there in a while either.
I haven't been there probably in like 5 or 6 years, but they're calling it Catwoman's Whip is there now. That sounds kind of weird. But yeah, it's not there anymore. Oh, that sucks. I used to like that one. It got shut down because someone got their legs chopped off. What?
Oh, yeah, I remember that story.
No way.
I don't know. Was that in St. Louis or was that a Superman elsewhere? Because I do remember.
Oh, no,
that.
it was Kentucky.
Okay.
Kentucky. A cable broke loose and sliced through a girl's legs.
Good.
Huh. Okay, well, there you go. Superman ride. Dangerous all the time. Don't get on it. With Tanner Hendrickson and Grant Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. Coming up next, does Brady Cook need to be a top 10 quarterback for Mizzou to make the college football playoffs? We'll get to that next here on 101 ESPN. Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis. I'm Alex Ferrario. We'll get to Believe It or Not coming up in our next segment. You send us scenarios, 314-399-9646. We'll tell you if we are going to believe it or not. But, T-Bone, Believe It or Not, Brady Cook, a top 100 player in college football, as ESPN put out their top 100 players in college football for the upcoming season. Now, it's not like he's sitting top 20, top 10, but number 65 for Brady Cook coming into the season amongst all college football players. And if you're just going off of quarterbacks, he's the 11th best QB in their rankings. Now, if you look at some of these other quarterbacks, some notable guys are higher up there. This one should piss BK off, but Quinn Ewers is sitting at number 23. Jalen Milroe sitting at number 22. But the question, I think, is more about Brady Cook. How high does he need to be if this Mizzou football team is making the college football playoffs? Because we talk so much about how high-powered this offense can be. We talk a lot about the strides that they took last year and a lot of the players that they brought over, even though they did lose Darius Smith yesterday for the entirety of the season, which is a massive blow for that defense. How high up does Brady Cook need to be, T-Bone, if this team's making the playoffs?
You know, when I saw this list and I saw that he was there at 11, I thought, okay, that probably seems about right. But I kind of wonder if he has to be like a top 10 quarterback in college football for Mizzou to make the playoff. And when I say that originally, because this was the initial reaction I got when I asked BK the question, it was, what? No. I said, well, the more I think about it, you think back to last year's team. It's fair to say he was not a top 10 quarterback across college football last year. Now, granted, last year a much more loaded quarterback class than it is this year. But you look back at the Missouri Tigers last year and their success. They had Cody Schrader, who was awesome for them. They had an incredible running game. They had an incredible defense, and they lost some pieces from that defense going into this year. You just mentioned the injury that they had, which is a big deal yesterday, and he's going to be out for the entire season now because of a knee injury, and you don't have Cody Schrader, and you don't know what the backfield is going to look like. Now, maybe they replace that production. We'll have to wait and see once we get into the games to really have a better idea of where they are at with their running back room. But let's just say that running back room does take a step back. They don't get the kind of production they got out of Cody Schrader from a year ago. Let's say the defense does take a step back because they lost some pieces from a year ago, and they're not able to replace that talent and replace this injury that happened yesterday. I mean, there's an argument then that Brady Cook probably needs to be a top 10 quarterback in college football. He needs to be the guy that is driving the Missouri Tigers offense because their schedule, it is easy where they only got really 3 tough games on that schedule, the A&M, Alabama, and Oklahoma. Well, he still is going to have to be the guy that drives the offense, gets the ball to Luther Burden, gets the ball to his weapons out in space, make sure that they move up and down the field. Because if we're talking about the Missouri Tigers having success, my guess is it's not so much about their defense. It is the offense was really good once again like it was last year. And that's why I say if you do see some of those step backs that I had mentioned, I think there's an argument to be made that Brady Cook's going to have to be a top 10 quarterback across college football for the Missouri Tigers to avoid those upsets, to win probably one of 3 at a minimum of those 3 games that I mentioned and get into the college football playoff.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the only way that this team is a playoff team is if Brady Cook is a top 10 quarterback. I mean, if you look at how ESPN ranked these other quarterbacks, you're talking about playoff teams. Quinn Ewers, you've got Jalen Milroe with Alabama, you've got Oregon's quarterback. The funny part about it is, I think you could make an argument that he was close to a top 10 quarterback last year. I'm just looking at last year's numbers for Quinn Ewers, 3,479 passing yards with 22 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Cook had 100 less passing yards and 3 less touchdowns, but you were talking about being close to that. But for me, if that's a playoff team, they're a playoff team from their offense, not from their defense. I don't really know what to expect from their defense this year, especially after that big news of Smith being injured yesterday for the entirety of the season. But I do know what this offense can provide. Sure, the backfield has a big question mark with it, but you know what doesn't have question mark? Luther Burden, who's the 5th best player on this list. Brady Cook, who is right there on the cusp of being a top 10 quarterback. And I think by the end of the season, he's going to be going up against other quarterbacks this season that are in that top 10. And if Brady Cook can outplay those other quarterbacks, you're talking about this being a playoff team.
And I saw a text on the 3-1 from the 314. Cook is average. What does he do really well? He's just a offensive general for the Missouri Tigers. I agree with that, but because of what you said, like looking through this list of the top 100 players across college football and who the quarterbacks are that are ranked ahead of them, it's not a who's at the quarterback position. Like Cam Rising at Utah, like he's fine. He's like 30. He's like your age still playing college football because he's been in the play so long. You look at Dylan Gabriel, like he's once you get to like the top 25 in this list from ESPN, kind of like the top 4 quarterbacks. I don't think he necessarily has to be like top 5. Like, does he have to be better than Shedeur Sanders, Quinn Ewers, Jalen Milroe? No, I don't think so. Dylan Gabriel, Carson Beck of Georgia? No. But once you get past those guys, he probably, even as a quarterback that I would say isn't like elite at anything, he's good or great at just about everything, he probably should be top 10 probably in terms of when you look at, maybe not by the numbers, but when you just think about the quarterback position across college football by the end of the season, I would say I need to hear an argument that he probably needs to be top 10 because he is a good, not great quarterback in a very weak quarterback class this year.
Yeah, well, and it's really going to come down to with him not turning the ball over. Like, you look at all these top quarterbacks in the top 10, 6 or less interceptions. You're not fumbling the ball an awful lot. That's going to come down to Brady Cook. You want to be in the top 10, you keep possession of the ball better than what these other guys are, which I know seems like Captain Obvious statement, but that's Brady Cook's MO there. If you don't give up the interceptions, you're talking about success with this team. The other thing that we've seen a lot of people ask is Luther Burden in the Heisman conversation. He was number 5 on this list amongst the top 100 players, and like you look at all of the other players in the top 5, I think there's only one other offensive playmaker, T-Bone, if I'm not mistaken, and that was Travis Hunter, who was sitting at number 3. Is it realistic for Burden to get Heisman votes? Absolutely, if he has the season we're all expecting. Man, it's going to be tough. I mean, you look at the past 2 wide receivers that have won the Heisman. You've got Devontae Smith, who had 1,800 receiving yards and 23 touchdowns. And then the guy prior to that was Desmond Howard. So, like, it's not going to be easy for Luther Burden. Does he have a shot? Absolutely. But we're talking about a historic season for a Mizzou wide receiver if we're going to be talking Heisman.
Yeah, you'd have to see Devontae Smith level numbers. Oh, and by the way, he'd probably have to be a factor on kickoffs and punt returns. Like, that's
Agreed.
what it's going to take. Like, do I think he has a shot? If I'm being completely honest, no. I think they're going to look at the quarterback position. They're going to look at a guy like Dylan Gabriel. They're going to look at Shedeur Sanders is up in this. I doubt he's going to put up those kind of numbers because his O-line won't be able to protect him. But they're going to look at more likely quarterbacks and running backs before they look at that wide receiver position. He's just going to have to put up unbelievable numbers to get into that conversation. But it does tell you just how elite of a talent he is, that he comes in at number 5 on ESPN's list. And he was top 15 last year. I think he was 15th in last year's list. The one thing I do think that could potentially hurt him is, we've talked about it, they've got so many weapons there at Missouri in terms of the wide receiver room for where you can look at Brady Cook to really spread the ball around. So, even though Burden's still going to be the number 1 target, it's not like it's Luther Burden and then there's a massive drop-off. There's still some pretty good weapons that'll be around him in that wide receiver room for the Tigers.
I'm excited for the upcoming Mizzou football season. We'll see if those 2 players can have the big years that we're all hoping for. Well, maybe not T-Bone, but all of us are hoping for.
6 wins from the Illini.
6 wins. You're going to get 4, maybe 6 on the college football EA Sports game, but not in real life. Coming up next, T-Bone and Grant are going to sing because I'm not going to have the music back here, but believe it or not, you send us a scenario. We'll tell you if we are going to believe it or not next on 101 ESPN. Alex Ferrario with you to talk about my friend Tracy Bibb taking care of you and your insurance with your home, with your car. Now is the perfect time to give Tracy a call because they are in the middle of Quote for the Cause. This is the Purple Stride event that the Riz Show puts on in honor of Jeff Burton and the pancreatic cancer. And Tracy Bibb right now is doing the Quote for the Cause. If you contact her and her team and just ask for a free, non-committal quote, they will, Tracy Bibb and her team, donate in your name to the Quote for the Cause. So it's a perfect time. I love Tracy so much because of the insurance coverage, because of the customer service, but also the community that she cares so much about and is strongly a part of. Her and her team always involved. So give her a call today. Tell her Alex Ferrario sent you, and you can find more out about the insurance rates, the competitive offers that they have, making sure you get the proper customer service with your insurance agency. All of that is there with Tracy Bibb. Again, a free non-committal quote, super simple. Just call her, 314-328-4260. Again, tell her Alex Ferrario sent you, 314-328-4260. It's no fib. You're always in great hands with the Bibb.
This is for you, Ferrario, back home. I know you can't hear it because copyright issues, but we got this.
I'm gonna feel like Simon Cowell.
I'm walking on air. I never thought I could feel so
Free.
flying away on a wing and a prayer.
Who could it be?
Believe it or not, it's just me.
Ah, look at you two. I feel like Simon Cowell on American Idol right now.
I know. You know, I got to bring this up. Grant, you know, there were 2 Thursdays that you missed while you were out because your newest baby was born on August 1st, if I remember correctly, which was a Thursday.
Look at you.
So,
thanks, buddy.
I got you, man. So Grant was in on that day, and he said, I'm not going to sing, believe it or not. I don't know what. I'm not a singer.
But then the graveyard bullied me, so I did it.
And I was like, Grant, just come on, man. Let it fly. We like to let our hair down here on BK.
Yeah.
And so he does it next Thursday. He does it last Thursday. He does it this Thursday. Man, Grant's an underrated singer, man. Grant's not giving himself enough credit. He just crushed it there.
It depends on the day.
Let me tell you something. That was about as glorious of a duo that I have heard in a long time. I am very impressed by both of you because I had no music underneath. That was all a cappella with you two, and you two just crushed it. So
sometimes I forget that YouTube does not hear the song.
Oh, yeah.
So that's a humbling realization when I think about it.
It's fun to go back and listen to that. So it is Believe It or Not time. 314-399-9646 is our Air Comfort Service text line. You can also send us scenarios on our YouTube chat, The Graveyard, over on our YouTube channel at 101 ESPN STL. You send us a scenario. We will tell you if we are going to believe it or not. Guys, I'll start. Believe it or not, the Cardinals finish with a below 75 run differential this season.
Oh, and they're currently at minus 63. I'll believe it. I'm skeptical if they're going to finish above 500 now. The belief I had from yesterday was more just looking at the standings, saying that they're still in this playoff race.
Sure.
I will say, believe it. I could definitely see where they finish with a minus 75 run differential or worse.
Yeah, with this schedule coming up, absolutely I'm believing it. And I wouldn't be surprised if they end up finishing last in the division once it's all said and done, because they can't put anything together. I don't know if it was Believe It or Not, but one of these, I had Believe It or Not, the Cardinals are a playoff team or they finished last in the division. And I was saying they finished last in the division. I still feel that way. That was before the Red Series. I feel it even more now.
Yep. T-Bone, what do you got?
Well, Grant kind of stole mine because I was going to go with a little backstory here on this one. So last time I saw my dad, he was in town like week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and we were talking. He's a huge Cardinals fan. He said, do you think they'll finish below 500? And at the time, I said, no, I still think they'll finish above 500. Not sure they're a playoff team. And we made a little friendly wager on it. You know, if they finish above 500, he's buying me a bottle of whiskey. If they finish below 500, I'm buying him a bottle of whiskey.
Oh, Tanner,
So
bad
there's meaning
investment.
behind it.
He's
bad to bad.
He's been really sending me a lot of pictures about whiskey he likes lately because I don't know if they're going to finish below 500. But he did pique my interest when he asked. Believe it or not, the St. Louis Cardinals will finish in last place in the National League Central. Just to give everybody an idea on the radio or in their car where things stand, they are 8.5 back of the Brewers. They are tied with the Cincinnati Reds after last night. The Cubs are only a game and a half back of them, and the Pittsburgh Pirates are only 3.5 games behind the St. Louis Cardinals.
Yeah, and you play all of these teams. You got 2 more series against Milwaukee, 1 more series against Pittsburgh, 1 more series against Cincinnati. A majority of those are played at home, which I think is a good thing. I'm going to say not believe it because I'm going to play the odds here in that one of Pittsburgh or Cincinnati just has a downfall in September. I don't know what their schedule looks like. I got to imagine it's not as difficult as the Cardinals' schedule. But I feel like one of the Cubs, Reds, or Pirates are going to fall off by the end of the season. So I'll say not believe it.
Yeah, but the problem is, like, you have games against these teams. The problem is when the Cardinals
can't
go
win
up against, when they go up against other NL Central teams, they suck.
Yeah, but you know what the problem is, Grant? At the end of the season, when they're out of the playoffs and they got no shot for it, is when they're going to start playing guys to see who they are, and that's where they're going to play well. And we're all going to look at this and say the Cardinals did it a month too soon or too late.
That's probably true. My gut's telling me to believe it, but Alex, what you said about, when you look at the field, like one of these teams are probably going to end up worse than the Cardinals. But I really do think it's a high chance that
it's going to be close.
It's going to be close. Like I could definitely see it.
Yeah, I'm not going to believe it just because I don't know if they'll fall to last. I think last place belongs to the Pirates. Have you guys seen what the Pirates have done of late?
Yeah.
They've lost 10 in a row. And I think I think it's like 10 of their last 12 or 11 of their last 13 they've lost. They're really scuffling because just like the Cardinals, they can't hit. So I will say not believe it, but it wouldn't shock me if the Cardinals finished 3rd or 4th in this division. It wouldn't shock me if the Reds passed them. I would be a little surprised if the Cubs did, and look, it's hard saying this because I know the Cubs just took 3 or 4 from them in Chicago not that long ago, but I don't think that Cubs team's very good. So I'll say not. I don't think they finished last. I'll say they finished 3rd.
Yeah. I mean, if you were to say, believe it or not, the Cardinals do not finish in the top 2, I would say believe that in a heartbeat. I think that's going to be the Reds and the Brewers, and then you're going to finish somewhere between the Cubs and the Pittsburgh Pirates. Grant, what do you got?
All right, so I've been sitting on this one for a couple weeks.
Oh, yeah.
Believe it or not, I feel like this is a fitting time to bring this up. The Blues win a playoff series before the Cardinals do.
Oh, that's a good one.
I'll say believe it. I don't think, the Cardinals aren't making the playoffs this year. I'm not so sure they're going to make it next year because I don't think they're going to make sweeping changes. And between this year and next year, I can see the Blues getting into the playoffs, even if it's one of the last spots. And guess who they've got? Jordan Binnington, who could steal them around. So I'll say believe it.
I think I'll believe it as well. Now, that being said, I don't know if the Blues are a playoff team this year, but I do like the direction they're going. Like, if they end up with Broberg and Holloway, or hell, just one of those guys.
Just one of them, yeah.
I do like the move that they made. I do think on paper they are a better team. I do think the West is better around them, though, so it's why I've cautiously said, like, okay, don't be surprised if they have fewer points than they did last year, and they had 92 last year, if I remember correctly off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But I'll believe it because I could see where maybe, whether it be this year or next year, they kind of sneak in. And to Alex's point, they've got Jordan Binnington. And we've seen a hot goaltender can steal a playoff series. So I'll believe it, which is tough to say as a big Cardinals fan.
Let's head to the Air Comfort Service text line and stick with that one. Guys, believe it or not, the Blues will have 5 or more 20-plus goal scorers this season.
5 or more.
How many did they have last year? Was 3 last year?
Let me pull this up.
Kyrou, Thomas, Buchnevich. Oh, Sods. They had 4 last year.
What was the number?
Neighbors.
20?
5. Yeah, 20 or more. They had Neighbors, too, so they had 5. Yeah. They had 5 guys above 20. Right?
Yeah,
no,
they had 6 because Shen was there.
Yeah,
I would
Shen
say,
was there, too.
I would say believe. I mean, they had 6 last year. So now if you did 25 plus, that's where it gets interesting.
Or if you did more guys, because I think that's what's interesting, too. If you did, like, let's say 7 guys on this team, because you'd expect Shen, Thomas, Saad might be a long shot, but Saad, Neighbors, Buch, Kyrou, those guys that pretty much are written in pen of guys who can score 20 goals next year. But do you think another guy could score 20 goals? Because now you're talking about Bolduc, you're talking about Texier, you're talking about Matthew Joseph, you're talking about potentially Dylan Holloway. That's where I think it gets more interesting.
Yeah, I don't know if there would be a 7th. I'm also skeptical. Like, you seemed confident Shen's getting to 20. I'm not confident in that. I think it's more likely you would have Brandon Saad can be written in pen for 20 to 25 goals because it's the Brandon Saad special.
No assists and all goals.
Yeah. Shen's the one I just don't know about because I thought Shen was pretty disappointing last year, so maybe he has a better year and he can get back to that mark. I could see Texier is the one that kind of intrigues me a little bit. I don't know if Fatska could get there.
No, I don't think Foxa does. Matthew Joseph is one I'd say keep an eye on.
Yeah, like there's a couple that are intriguing, but I will say no, that they don't have another one that gets to that mark of 20 plus.
I think they'll have more depth of scoring, so the scoring is going to be more spread out, which is a good thing, but it results in fewer, top scorers. So I think 5 you can lock in, 5 20-goal scorers. 6 is going to be a little bit of a stretch for me, so I'm going to not believe it when it comes to 6, but 5, I will believe it.
Cool. Believe it or not, 3 teams from the AFC South will make the playoffs this year.
3 teams from the AFC South. So Texas.
So you're talking Texans, Colts, Jaguars, Titans.
I'm not believing that.
Yeah.
Not either.
2.
I think 1.
Maybe.
1.
Who's the second?
I think
Colts.
Indy. Yeah.
Colts, if Richardson stays healthy, yeah, I'd say that one.
I'm not going to believe it because I think it's 2. I don't think Jacksonville's a playoff team. I actually think there's a chance they finish last in the division. And I mentioned I think Will Levis can have a breakout earlier when we did NFL quick hitters. They're kind of in that muddy middle. I still don't think, even if he breaks out, they can be a playoff team. So I'll say not. I think it's just Indy and Houston.
From the 618, believe it or not, Cards will have a 3-3 record after this homestand. Ha! Not.
Well, their pitching certainly doesn't help them going into this Dodgers series.
You taking 2 of 3 in any of these series is laughable.
I will say, I'll be optimistic. I'll say believe it. I'll say maybe not the Dodgers, but when you have that next series afterwards, when you go up against the Brewers,
the team that has shellacked you this season?
Yeah, I still don't believe much in the Brewers, and their pitching's going to set up a little better. Like, they've manipulated it to where Sonny Gray is now going to start in that Dodgers series. So you're still at least going to have Eric Fetty, Kyle Gibson, and then I think Miles Michaelis would be the other one. Also, it'll be curious to see, like, is Lance Lynn potentially available for one of those starts later on? Because he throws another side session on Friday, I believe. Nobody wants to hear it. But Steven Matz is going to probably have his last rehab start this Friday. Maybe you bring him back and see what he looks like. But I'll believe it. I'll say they go at least 3-3. I'll remain somewhat optimistic. I'm not sure how much I really believe it, but I'll believe it.
Grant, you want the optimism or you want the pessimism?
Yeah, no chance. Not believing it.
There we go, big boy. Grant Francis, Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Alex Ferrario. Jesse Rogers put a piece out earlier today at ESPN talking about Major League Baseball exploring putting in a 6-inning minimum for starting pitchers. T-Bone and I are going to dive into that coming up next year on 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Cardinals lost last night 9-2 as the Reds clobbered 5 home runs in the series finale with the Cardinals as they sweep that series in Cincinnati, and the Cardinals fall to 60-61. They're now below 500 for the first time since June. They'll hope to get back to 500 tomorrow as they're off today, and they'll welcome in the Dodgers for a 3-game set starting tomorrow. Miles Michaelis is projected to get the start for the Cardinals in Game 1 of that series. First pitch will be at 7:15. I'm Grant Francis. The SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Hey, coming up at the end of this segment, I'm going to get you your chance to win Cardinals Bud Bash tickets. We've got a 4-pack to give away, so stay tuned for the end of this segment. You'll have your chance to win a 4-pack of those tickets. And with Tanner Hendrickson and Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. As Jesse Rogers put a piece out earlier today on ESPN, and so I've only had the opportunity to skim through this, T-Bone, because it came out right around the time you and I started our show prep, but it's got a lot of people talking. And the title of this is, Could 6-inning minimum starting pitchers rule come to Major League Baseball? Now, on the surface, I'm sure there's a lot of old school players or fans like T-Bone who are like, stop changing baseball. It was great the way it was the first time. Probably your reaction. Other people look at it and say, okay, I'm a little more interested. So here's just kind of the basics. And T-Bone, correct me on any of these if I'm wrong. But the basics, it seems, with this 6-inning minimum is they're looking at making sure that starting pitchers go at least 6 innings every single time they take the mound, with some exceptions coming into play of when a starter can be taken out of the game. If he throws 100 pitches, if he gives up 4 or more earned runs, or if he gets injured with the required list sent the next day, avoiding manipulation and things like that. But otherwise, Major League Baseball is looking to, I guess in my opinion and my assumption, continue to develop these pitchers in a way that they're not used for 4 or 5 innings and then you're going into the bullpen, making the games a little bit more interesting for the fans rather than seeing guys come up through the system that get limited off of pitches thrown, and then by the time they get to the majors, they're used as essentially a bullpen arm, but you're getting 3 or 4 innings out of them.
Yeah, they are really wanting to bring back the starting pitcher. That is what Major League Baseball is trying to do with the idea of this. Now, you're right of they're looking, each time the starter takes him out, they want him to go 6 innings no matter what, unless those scenarios played out. And, like, I'm looking at some of these pitchers, because basically Major League Baseball is like, we want to get rid of the 5-and-dive starter. The only thing that I would have to say to this is, like, so basically these instances where the pitcher can be pulled early is, like, why we see a pitcher get pulled early now. Like, right. When you see Kyle Gibson reach 100 pitches in 5 innings, or he's at like 95 pitches at the 5th inning starts, okay, well, he's going to get pulled in the middle of that inning then. Pitchers that give up 4 earned runs early in starts, yeah, they're going to get pulled before the 6th inning. I don't understand how this rule would actually probably end up going into place and actually forcing teams to have their starters go deeper into games. I don't actually think that's going to be a thing that ends up working. I think the way that Major League Baseball is going to have to do this is go to the double hook rule, where it is when
I love that one.
I do too. I think it is. Now, if you wanted to put something on it to where, hey, if a starting pitcher goes 6 innings, by the time he comes out, you can still keep the designated hitter. I'm okay with that. But I just don't see, like, all this that was reported by Jesse Rogers as to what Major League Baseball is looking into. To me, this is what happens now. And I know nobody likes to hear that, but, like, I just don't see where this is going to end up doing what Major League Baseball's intention is, which is, we want to bring back the starting pitcher.
And that's the thing. This was the quote from an MLB official on Jesse Rogers' piece. Quote, "We are interested in increasing the amount of action in the game, restoring the prominence of the starting pitcher, and reducing the prevalence of pitching injuries. There are a whole host of options in addressing those issues." So, like, break these down individually. Okay, you go 6 innings, you're introducing the prominence of starting pitchers, which essentially is trying to prevent the pitching injuries because of the innings limit and the pitching limit that is taking place in the minor leagues with a lot of these younger players. But if you're trying to instill more action in the game, sure, you can do the 6-inning rule for these starting pitchers. I think if you want more action and more prominence in the game and more excitement, you do the double hook rule. And the way that Jesse Rogers has laid this out is it seems like they were discussing the double hook rule, but this rule might be a opposite direction that they can go. To whereas I think you're instilling the excitement, the prominence of the starting pitcher, because if you pull your pitcher, you're losing your DH, which forces managers to really think about what they want to do here. I think the double hook rule benefits Major League Baseball and their fans more than just saying, oh, well, that guy's got to go 6 innings unless he gives up 4 or more earned runs or 100 pitches.
Yeah, like if you look at like last night's game, for example, with Kyle Gibson, he would have gotten pulled no matter what because he gave up more than 4 earned runs, and he would have been pulled after 4 2/3 innings pitched, and he was at 95 pitches when he got pulled. Now, the one thing that this rule does eliminate, or in theory would help them eliminate, is you no longer have the opener. Now, Emilio Pagan, for example, who got the start for the Reds last night and their bullpen game went 2 innings. Okay, well, you can no longer do that if you're the Cincinnati Reds, which, okay, that I don't necessarily mind because that will help eliminate the bullpen game. But I also don't think it adds the incentive of, oh, well, you really need to push your starters. You need to really develop your starters to be able to pace themselves to get through 6 innings. No, this kind of does part of its job of, okay, the bullpen games are no longer a thing, but it doesn't necessarily pace pitchers to go deeper into games because all you're going to get is Blake Snell now just goes 100 pitches compared to his typical like 85, and he just maxes out another 15 pitches, and you see if he gets through 6 innings because you have the caveat of, oh, well, the moment he hits the 100 pitch mark, he can just get pulled out of the game. I think there is some good in this, and it's kind of the first right step in the direction that Major League Baseball probably needs to be going to try and bring back the starting pitcher. But I don't think this goes all the way like it should, which is the double hook rule, which I think Major League Baseball is too afraid to implement into the big leagues.
Yeah, I just think, like, instilling the 6-inning rule sure sounds realistically like, oh, well, you're going to get back to having guys go 7 or 8 innings because that's the rule. But you're right. All this does is when you get a guy who's in a bind and he gives up 4 runs, well, he's throwing a lot of pitches in 2 or 3 innings, and you're still talking about getting to the bullpen game. Somebody texted in and said what this is doing is it's eliminating the use of the bigger uses of bullpen games. Sure. So one every other series you get rid of the quote-unquote bullpen game like we saw last night from the Cincinnati Reds. I don't really care about that bullpen game as much as I dislike he gave up 3 runs in 3 2/3 and he's at 90 pitches. Let's get rid of this guy, and now we're going to do this bullpen game. That's where I love the double hook rule. And you're right, Major League Baseball seems to be afraid of using this. I think if you want the excitement back in the game, that's the strategy that gets fans excited of. If you pull your pitcher here because he looks like he's messed up, well, now you're going to lose your DH. And if you lose your DH, what does that do to your offense for the rest of the game? I just think Major League Baseball has done some good things. I think the pitch clock has helped timing of the games. I like the extra innings rule of having somebody at second base. I just think if you go with a 6 innings mandatory for a pitcher, it doesn't really do much. It doesn't move the meter in terms of getting that excitement for a game. Whereas the double hook, I think I'm a lot more intrigued from start to finish.
Yeah, and like I'm looking at Sonny Gray's last start. You know, the one we said that didn't go well in Cincinnati. 5 innings, 5 hits, 6 earned runs, 9 strikeouts, 3 home runs allowed. Well, technically, by the rule that Major League Baseball has implemented, Sonny Gray can leave that game if they went this route because he's allowed more than 4 earned runs. He's not at 100 pitches, though, and he hasn't gone the required 6, and he's not hurt. But you've got the caveat as he can leave the game in the 4th inning. Where it gets more interesting, especially in the scenario where the Cardinals were in, where they were down 6-1 through 5 innings, and Sonny Gray was at 85 pitches, if you have the double hook rule implemented, and say that the starter has to go 6 innings and then can be pulled and you not lose the DH, well, now becomes the chess game for Oli Marmol and the Cardinals coaching staff, for example, of, okay, do we push Sonny Gray another inning so we can keep our DH while we try to come back in this game in which we're trailing 6-1, or do we just pull him because we don't think he's effective enough, but we lose our DH?
Right. Somebody texted in from the 217 and said, guys, this is more about improving the terrible offense than it is about fixing the pitching. I don't agree with that at all.
I don't think it actually would have helped that much.
No, I mean, you just painted the scenario. Kyle Gibson would have been out of the game yesterday in 3 2/3 with the 95 pitches and the 4 earned runs he gives up. You get 4 runs off of a pitcher, and now you're going to the bullpen. So it's not changing that. To me, what they're trying to do is they're trying to stop the starting pitchers get to the major leagues, and after one really good season, they go down with Tommy John, and they're out for 2 years, and they're never the same. It seems they're trying to fix the problem in the minor leagues more than worry about the guys at the major leagues.
Yeah, well, I still don't think it works because my Blake Snell example.
Yeah.
There's going to be more young arms that are flamethrowers that come up that are still just going to go max effort. They're just going to now go more pitches of max effort. They're now going to go 100 pitches of max effort, not necessarily get through 6 innings. If you really want to pace a guy to get through 6 innings, he probably does have to go more of the double hook rule of, okay, I have to get through this 6th inning, otherwise my team has an actual consequence, which is we lose the designated hitter and have to play an NL style of baseball.
Yeah, I actually think if you were to do some type of mandate to a pitcher, which I don't think they would ever agree to this, I think the mandate would be more interesting of they have to throw 100 pitches. Which I guess this is essentially that, to where you can't pull them until they're at 100 pitches, but you also could pull them if you throw 4 earned runs or give up 4 earned runs.
Yeah, I just think when you start to go down that pathway is when you can actually kind of push guys towards more injuries as well. It's what makes it so fascinating because it is such a tough thing to maneuver because the arm is not supposed to be throwing a baseball like it does.
Yeah, you're right. Tanner Hendrickson, Graham Francis, I'm Alex Ferrario. All right, now you got your chance to win a 4-pack of tickets to next Tuesday night's Budweiser Bash game for Cardinals versus Brewers. Next week's Bud Bash features a limited edition Woody Williams bobblehead. You need to be Texter 101 to our text line at 314-399-9646. On the junk drawer today, we talked about a ride that we found out is now shut down at Six Flags. What is the name of that ride? If you can do that and be Texter 101, you get the 4-pack of tickets to the Budweiser Bash for Cardinals and Brewers on Tuesday, August 20th. You can get all the details on this season's series of Budweiser Bash Cardinals games now over at cardinals.com/promotions. We'll hit the rewind next here on BK and Ferrario. And make sure you join us at 101 ESPN for the second annual Blues and Brews on Friday night, September 20th at the Anheuser-Busch Brewery. Get fired up for the upcoming Blues season at this outdoor street party featuring live music from country music star Matt Stell and St. Louis's own Charles Glenn's group. Plus appearances by Blues players, alumni, food trucks, 101 giveaways, and so much more. Tickets are just $20 and are on sale now. We will all be out there so you can hang out with us as well. Learn more at 101ESPN.com. As we hit the rewind today, if you missed anything from the show today, you can check it out up on our podcast page, 101ESPN.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. It is all presented by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. T-Bone, Grant, let's wrap up where we started the show today, talking about the disappointment of the series that the Cardinals just had against the Cincinnati Reds. And it's not so much that they lost 3 games. Yes, that sucks to see and not a good look for a team that keeps saying they're going to make the playoffs. What's more concerning is watching everything break on this team. We've talked about the pitching and how your starting pitching ERA since July 1st has been basically close to like 5 in the ERA category. Your bullpen has depleted in the sense that you don't have the elite arms you had at the first half of the season, but more than anything, it's your offense. You were out-homered by Cincinnati in the Great American Small Park 10-1. They outscored you 19-4 and was significantly better than you with runners in scoring position, a .333 batting average compared to your .200 batting average. There should be a lot of concern and red alarm bells going off about this Cardinals team now that you're headed into a stretch of series that seem impossible to win.
Yeah, their offense, and look, we talked about earlier as well, the pitching's going to have to be better. The rotation's got to give them a fighting chance. Bullpen's going to have to be better as well in this upcoming stretch, because I do believe that you're not going to get much offensive production. Your pitching almost has to exceed expectations. But with that being said, the offense is going to have to start coming through, and they're going to have to start hitting for power, because when you're at the Great American Small Park, you should look a lot better than the Cardinals did, where you score just 4 runs. You mentioned their runners in scoring position, just 6 total extra base hits. Their slugging percentage as a team now on the season is .386. That's the lowest by a Cardinals team at this point in the season since 2014. Before that, it was 1995. You've got to hit for power, and I don't just mean home runs. You know, it's not home run or bust for the Cardinals. But you got to start getting extra base hits. You got to start coming through with runners in scoring position, and honestly hitting it for some power when you have runners in scoring position, so you can put up the innings like you saw in this Red series, where the Reds, not only did they come through with runners in scoring position, they would put up crooked numbers at innings. You know, you get the 3-run homer from Jonathan India last night that kind of puts that game out of reach early on. That's what the offense has to do. They've got to find a way to come through and start hitting for power, and it's going to be tough because they're going to see some great pitching during this stretch, but they're going to have to come through. Otherwise, the Cardinals season will probably be over here in the next 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, your season could be on life support following next Thursday's game against the Milwaukee Brewers, because if you can't win one of those series, and let's say best case scenario, you pick up a win in each, I mean, you're watching the Milwaukee Brewers go 2 more games above you. You're watching some of the other teams like Cincinnati, Atlanta heat up around you. You might be on life support by the end of Milwaukee Brewers, and then you go into a road series with the Minnesota Twins, then the Padres and the Yankees. This is about as critical of a stretch for the Cardinals as you've seen. And, oh, by the way, after today, you only have 1 day off prior to the next day, which would be September 5th. So, like, you talk about fatigue now. After the 1 day off between the Dodgers and Brewers series, you don't have another day off, and that's with Milwaukee, Minnesota, San Diego, New York, and Milwaukee once again with traveling sprinkled in between. So, not going to be an easy path for this Cardinal team. We'll talk more about the series against the Dodgers tomorrow. We're also going to have Daniel Nugent-Bowman, the insider for the Edmonton Oilers, get an update on those offer sheets. So much more. Grant T-Bone and I will be back tomorrow from 11 to 2. The Fast Lane coming up next from 2 to 6 here on 101 ESPN.